Alright, it is 6 o'clock on Monday, March 17th, 2025, St. Patrick's Day. I'm calling to order the Rutland Select Board meeting. We're meeting in the lower level of the Rutland Public Library. We are on Zoom, as well as being live streamed on local access, as well as recorded for re-airing on our social media, including YouTube and other outlets. May we please stand for the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would entertain a motion to approve Treasury warrant 25-19 and 25-PW19.
I'll make a motion to approve Treasury warrant 25-19 and 25-PW19.
Is there a second?
Second. Paul, you got it.
Oh, I thought it's your turn.
No, you got it.
I forgot.
Any questions, comments, concerns? Austin, anything of note?
Just that our snow and ice deficit now stands at $117,000.
117?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Roll call, Harry.
Second, aye.
That's an aye.
Ledger I.
Whitman, aye. I should mention that we are currently a 4-member in-person board. I don't see Tom on Zoom. I don't know if he'll be joining or not. I would entertain a motion, I think we'll do these separate because of attendance maybe, to approve meeting minutes of a regular meeting, March 3rd, 2025. I believe everyone was in attendance for these.
Yep. I make motion to accept the minutes from March 3rd, 2025.
Is there a second?
I will second the motion.
Any other conversation, corrections, concerns? Roll call, Harry.
Second, aye.
That's an aye.
Ledger I.
Whitman, aye. We have the meeting minutes from March 5th, 2025. This was a joint meeting with FinCom to discuss the budget. I believe everyone except Tom was present. I think Tom had started on Zoom and then dropped off. I would entertain a motion.
I make a motion to accept the minutes from March 5th, 2025.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any conversation? Roll call, Harry.
Second, aye.
That's an aye.
Ledger I.
Whitman, aye. We have the meeting minutes from March 6th, 2025. This is also a budget meeting, and I don't believe Tom was on at all for this. This was joint with FinCom. Is there a motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve the minutes of March 6th, 2025.
Second motion.
Motion and second, roll call.
Second, aye.
That's an aye.
Ledger I.
Whitman, aye. Alright, sorry, I guess we could have done those in a bulk. For some reason, I was thinking that there was an additional set. My apologies. We'll move right in. Is there anyone here for public comment? Name and address, please.
Jean Stigliano, CC Drive. My first one is, I brought this up after the last, or one of the town meetings. I just wanna know what's been done to ensure that we can hear, we as the public can hear what happens at town meeting, as that has not been the case the past few town meetings. And it is the case at Glenwood concerts. We can hear the principal, we can hear the chorus director. They have a good sound system, but it isn't being used for the public at town meeting. And I wanna find out in advance of town meeting what's being done to ensure we can all hear.
We'll make a note of it, and I can't speak, I'm not 100% sure. I believe when we do town meeting there, we use cable access sound equipment so that it can be recorded and streamed live on cable versus the in-house setup that Glenwood Elementary uses. I'm not 100% sure though, Paul or Austin, if you guys can speak to it at all.
There's a system in Glenwood School that will allow an individual to have something to hold up to their ear to listen to, all right? I put it into play, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I forget. And nobody was interested in it, so it just kind of went to the side, and it's still there. I would have to prove it out to make sure it's still working, but nobody was interested in it at all. We'd have it there at the sign-in table, and absolutely nobody took one.
Okay, well,
So-
I would be interested in it, but why aren't we using the sound system that actually works? Right?
So I think she was talking about something else, Jean. Paul, sorry. So candidly, I think I noticed at the last town meeting especially, some of the connections that we had from our equipment plugging into the school sound system looked a little loose. So Jean, obviously we've been focused on
Well, that's been,
budget and other things, so I'll work with Paul to make sure that we have a good
that's been a standard,
test it.
it's been in there, and
Paul, I got it. We'll work on that.
we've been plugging into the school sound system now for
Yep,
a
Paul,
long time.
we'll take care of it.
Okay, I just.
Yeah.
I also have a lot of questions on the budget, and I just wanna know when is the right time to have that conversation. I don't wanna take up time when you have a full agenda.
Yeah.
Is there a meeting for that?
So I believe depending on the outcome of our meeting, FinCom will be scheduling an additional meeting. But I think we as select board are going to have ongoing meetings with the budget, especially after we have it approved. We have, I believe Austin, working with Carrie, for the library, has already booked some public information sessions and everything for the budget. So I guess my question to you would be kind of what level are you looking at for the budget questions and everything? And is it stuff that can be kind of funneled through the TA's office in front of us during our discussion? Just from that perspective, I guess.
Well, I just went through every line, cause this is all new to me, how things work here. And on quite a few of the lines, I have some questions about what they're pertaining to, about FTEs. I also wanna know if we could please get copies of the revolving fund budgets. That doesn't seem to be there, and as the public, do we have a right to see what those are? What their income and expenses are, and what their balances are, and all, like the rec fund and whatever other ones there are?
So we've been focused on the general fund. We have developed budgets for revolving and enterprise funds, but candidly, we haven't been able to figure out the general fund yet. It's our intent to, and as I mentioned in the budget meetings the other day, to come back to the select board and FinCom to present the revolving and enterprise funds. To your question though about revolving funds, actually it's not common. We're actually a little bit more transparent here in Rutland. I give them a lot of credit in their history to actually develop a full budget for revolving funds. The only thing statutorily that we have to do is set a spending limit. That's it.
But do we get to see their income and expenses? Is that foilable?
Of course.
So do we
Well,
have to foil it to see it, or is that
no, you don't
gonna
have to.
be
So,
presented?
yep, so in the format that we have, cause that was some feedback that we received from FinCom last year. You'll see at the top of the page, instead of just the expenses that you see for example, recreation, you'll also see the revenue that comes in. Projected revenue. The hard thing is not knowing how successful our revolving fund is gonna be. We're just projecting enough to cover our expenses.
Well, wouldn't we have like the year-to-date or the previous years,
Correct, but
and would that be public information?
of course,
And presented, or?
yeah, well that's gonna be in the format that's presented to the board
And when will that be?
when we finish our general fund discussion.
So historically at town meeting, all of that information is available for the revolving funds as well, but normally we do in our budget discussions, discuss the revolving funds because we recommend a spending cap for the revolving funds ahead of town meeting. And those conversations generally happen with the budget. Obviously this year, the budget conversations are behind because we couldn't agree on an override or not, and now a cut budget or not, what a cut budget looks like. So those are some conversations that, because we have time constraints to get ballot questions to the clerk's office and education pieces out for the public, we've been focusing on the general fund budget, knowing that the revolving funds are essentially monies that are coming in dedicated to specific accounts, and then set that spending limit.
Yeah, I just think at some point before town meeting, it would be good to have the conversation rather than trying to have it at town meeting, that's all.
I agree, and we'll take that into consideration for sure. Thank you. Any other public comment? Name and address.
Carol Benoit, Turkey Hill Road. You talked about, I had heard today too, also, information systems, sessions at the library. Are those dates set? I'm doing the newsletter for this
Yep,
senior
so
center, so it would be.
there'll
good
be
to
my
know.
update in just 2 seconds.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else here for public comment? I know I spoke to Tim earlier in the week or last week, and he had mentioned that he attended the CMRPC annual or quarterly meeting, and that there are some grant funding opportunities for some different things. So I had asked him to forward that information along to Austin and John to kind of provide that as a resource. I'm not sure if he had any other updates or not.
Yeah, if he doesn't, I do, but I'll, if he's
Well,
on.
I wanna hold the conversation about the membership piece, if that's what, okay. Then I don't see him, so go ahead, Jean.
Okay, so what they introduced at that meeting was creating a municipal and public safety building authority, which at first we thought would be the state controlling us. But in reality, it's taking money from the marijuana sales and using some of that in a fund to help towns rebuild or improve. So there was a lot of discussion about that, and they're looking for support from towns for that. It's State Representative Natalie Bly and Senator Joe Comerford from further west that have introduced this legislation, and they're hoping that other towns that need work done on their municipal buildings, which we do, would support their bill and maybe talk to our senator representative to get them to co-sponsor the bill. So there was a lot of information about that. They're looking for support from the boards. So I don't know if you need any more information in order to provide that support.
I got the email about the kind of agenda, so I think we can send that information around. I didn't realize that they were asking for support specifically until after we had posted our agenda for that. So we can add that to our next agenda if the board's amenable to sending letters of support for that. Just for the public, it's similar to the MSBA program, the Mass School Building Authority, that there's funds created or set aside for reduced loans, and it's still, I believe, it's still a application process, a multi-year, multi-step application process. But it would help with town buildings instead of school buildings.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And just so the board's aware, I did, through the Management Association, sign on to a letter from the Management Association advocating for that as well. It's been something that they've been working on for a couple of years now and has virtually gone nowhere, but it's worth a shot.
Yeah. And there was a lot of discussion on what it would provide because somebody figured out how much money it was, and it's not enough for one town to redo their buildings, much less all the towns that need it. So would it be an interest-free loan, or they're still it's still a work in progress, but they're looking for more broader support to get it moved.
Thank you.
Through the chair, is the information online?
Yes,
It is, at CMRPC, about this?
I mean, I could find it. I don't remember where I saw it.
Okay, and
It's
I
also
get
on the MMA website, Harry, you can find information there too.
I was gonna say, I think the agenda for the quarterly meeting had some information linked to
Yeah, that's where, it was
to-
linked to that. It links to the bills
to
that
the
are
bills and
proposed.
the senator and representative, I believe, is where I had seen it. Thank you. And thank you both Tim and Jean for attending the quarterly meeting.
Keith was there.
Keith was awesome, thank you, all three then, thank you. Anyone else for public comment? Moving into communications, member comments, announcements, and town administrator update. I just quickly want to congratulate the Wachusett Regional High School girls or women's basketball team for their D1 state finals win. That was an amazing win, 55-54 I believe. We have a lot of Rutland women playing on the team. An assistant coach is a Rutland resident, a scorekeeper is a Rutland resident. So not only is it awesome for our school district, I think it's the first women's basketball state win in the school history. But it's also Rutland has some big names involvement in that. So congratulations, that's an awesome milestone. We are transitioning from winter into spring, and so with that comes all the road issues and weather issues and everything. So please reach out to DPW if there's a chat. If you have notice any potholes or concerns or anything, obviously the dirt roads and non-paved roads are really punky. The trails and everything, there's still spots of really severe ice, as well as just the swampiness. Check on your neighbors still, take care of each other. Do any other members have any comments or announcements or anything?
Maybe I should mention that Carrie did hold that special meeting about the library,
Oh, yeah.
and it was a nice presentation. She's got a lot of work to do on it, so there'll be follow-up meetings.
Awesome.
regarding that.
Thank you for attending too, I appreciate that. Austin, do you wanna go into your town administrator update?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Just a few updates. So the Wachusett Regional School District received a grant for $90,000 to partner with Central Mass Regional Planning Commission to conduct phase 2 of their regionalization study. So this will come in the form of a report that analyzes, that provides a comprehensive facility analysis of all of the buildings within the district, town and district-owned buildings, identifying general conditions of the buildings, major issues, estimates for repair and maintenance costs. They'll be contracting with a separate engineer and architecture firm to conduct that analysis. There will also be a community engagement report as to why students are staying and leaving the district, especially going into the high school. That's one of the biggest drop-offs, if you will, from students going from 8th into 9th grade. The target focus groups will be parents. Interviews starting this spring throughout the fall, and the final report is expected to be presented next spring. This afternoon, I and members of staff met with representatives from Mass DOT and their consulting design firm Fuss & O'Neill to review the 10% design plans for the proposed roundabout at the Four Corners intersection, which is the intersection of Barry Paxton Road, Route 122 and Pleasantdale Road. They were seeking initial feedback from us just on the proposed roundabout. You can see on the back end of your of the report, you can see the proposed roundabout. Some interesting concepts here. One, they just want to make sure that the turning radius works well for some of the larger vehicles, especially tractor trailer trucks, which do frequent and use that as a cut through. But based off of Mass DOT feedback, they're also including a widened sidewalk to allow for future connectivity to the rail trail down in the State Park area, and also connecting sidewalks, which we requested to be a part of the Village Center district to kind of revitalize that down there. This is just a 10%, so there's still a lot of work to do. The next phase will be getting to 25%, which after that they'll hold a public hearing. Their estimated date for the public hearing is May of 2026, likely sooner than that, but that's where they're slating that to occur. It's still on schedule to be going out to advertisement for bids in about March 2028 for a summer start construction. As was mentioned earlier, we've scheduled dates for public forums for the Board and Finance Committee to hold for the budget. We'll also invite members of town staff in the school district to attend as well. So those dates are the following: Sunday, April 6th at the library in the Blair Room, 1 o'clock. Wednesday, April 9th at the library, also in the big room, 6 p.m. Sunday, April 13th in the library, big room, 1 p.m. Tuesday, April 14th at the senior center, 10 a.m. Wednesday, April 23rd, at the library, 1 p.m. Sunday, April 27th, library, 1 p.m. and Tuesday, April 27th at the senior center. Hoping to do an evening session, but haven't confirmed that yet with Nancy. And that's all I have for my update. So there's 7 sessions for public forums, in addition to the finance committee meetings and select board meetings.
Thank you, Austin, for scheduling those and working with Carrie and Nancy to schedule those. Does anyone have any questions for Austin and his TA update? I guess just for the Four Corners project.
Yep.
Those initial 10% design plans and then the 25% funding wise, is that coming out of chapter 90? I remember for the TIP project when we did Wachusett and Main Street, that TIP project, that some of the state or the town required matching was chapter 90.
So this will not require any local match from the town because it was state initiated.
Okay.
And it's a state road. So based off of a lot of feedback, especially from the police chief, the director of District 3 initiated this project to go on the tip. So as of right now, there's no required local contribution for any right-of-way acquisitions or anything. If that changes, obviously we'll let the town know and let the board know. But this was all like we haven't paid anything for any of this design work. This is their consulting engineer and their initiated project.
And
pretty much because it's their road.
right, and I appreciate that. I just wanna make sure that we have, especially from the public safety side, input as far as knowing the issues at that intersection. And I appreciate the mindfulness of maintaining access, especially to 18-wheelers and everything, because that is a major thoroughfare for over to 49 and the Pike and everything. So to be able to maintain that as well.
So yeah, we actually have another meeting tomorrow in person with public safety staff, public works, town planner, with the same group of folks. It's a road safety audit meeting, and that's where a lot of the information that you just mentioned comes out. So that'll further inform their analysis. There's still already a couple things that they noticed they need to change, like there's if you look at GIS, it looks like there's actually more wetlands than there actually is, or are wetlands, so they need to do some further delineation there. There's also some right of way that they noticed that they didn't need to take, so there's things like that this will constantly be tweaked. Like I said, this is just a very, very early 10% sketch. But it looks interesting. The one thing they weren't concerned about is space.
Okay,
They've got plenty of space for a roundabout there.
that was one of my other considerations, just because I know planning board has had a few public hearings about one of the properties over there. And so I just wanted to make sure that any of those property owners that are looking to do any sort of economic development over there are aware that this is on the books, and so that as they're planning their work, that they're suddenly not getting a significant portion that they've invested a lot of money into taken or whatever. I don't know what that process is.
Yeah, so just so you know, like obviously this could change as we further along this project, but the colors that you see right now, and I apologize for folks at home or even here that can't see this, but the only permanent easements that are needed are those that are listed in yellow.
Okay.
Everything else is temporary or pretty much temporary or construction easements.
Any other questions for Austin? Thank you, Austin, I appreciate it. And moving on, we have the budget discussion. We also have economic development here. We have the pet food pantry here as well, I believe. So I don't know if the board's amenable to taking those two at least out of order, just because we have individuals here to speak to those items. Is the board amenable? We can
Sure.
start with the if economic development, Jeff and Sabrina and Mike, are you guys okay with economic development?
Chris, he is gonna be here, he's probably 5 minutes out.
Okay, then we can start, I'm sorry, I forget your name.
I'm Kara.
Kara, I'm
Yes.
sorry.
No, please don't be, don't be.
If the board's okay, starting with Kara and the pet food mini library. I believe, if you recall, Kara had spoken at public comment and we had asked for a little bit more information. And then to get it on an agenda item so we could speak more directly to it. So Kara, do you wanna give a brief little recap?
Sure, I also do have visuals, if you guys would appreciate.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, appreciate it. Yeah, so basically what I am trying to do is start a project that would support pet owners that are facing financial need by creating, I'm calling it Lacey's Lunchbox after my late dog, but basically in the form of the little free libraries, so going from town to town to install these basically dog food pantry boxes. So the purpose of this project is to support pet owners, again, facing financial challenges by providing free and accessible pet food drives through a community-driven pantry. So ease of access would really set this project apart from the pet food pantry that is currently going on in Shrewsbury, Mass, or even like any other projects that might be going on through like town food pantries. This one, you'd be able to access it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they are in more accessible locations such as Rutland might not have, access to Shrewsbury quite as often. Being that it is not something that needs to be staffed consistently as the Shrewsbury pantry, they're only open 2 hours a week, so they have actually had really good success per their founder. But with those minimal hours of operation, again, people do struggle to get out there in the times of day that they are open. So what I would like to do is place one of these quote-unquote lunch boxes, one of these little free libraries on accessible town land in a town center, potentially at a church or a community center in various towns, to promote convenience for owners who may have a difficult time traveling. So I did attach some rough photos on the back side of the sheet, but basically the structure would be approximately 28 inches high, approximately 24 inches wide, 27 inches in length, and then about 2 feet off the ground. Freestanding on 4 legs, allowing for portability while also maintaining stability. I'm not envisioning nailing it or securing it to the ground in any other way, shape, or form, just in case it needed to be moved for whatever reason. Hoping that the latches that would close this pantry would be enough to, expel any bears or other creatures that we might have moving around here. And the boxes would be made of wood and then with a plexiglass door, basically. So to preserve freshness of the food and again, to keep critters out, that plexiglass door would open. There's a tote, plastic Tupperware, place the food inside the Tupperware. This would be community driven. I do have a few donors already in place that are ready to keep the box stocked. I myself would be in charge of maintaining the box, both internally and externally, maintaining the space and keeping it nice and aesthetically pleasing, while also keeping it filled. My contact information would be present on the box in case any issues came up that the public found. Would advertise it via social media, flyers within local businesses and food pantries would be utilized. The Central Mass Pet Pantry, again, in Shrewsbury, also said that they would be willing to, assist with word of mouth and assist with donations, which has been wonderful. So let's see, I think those are kind of my big points. Again, I would be responsible for all maintenance and upkeep if for whatever reason the town requested it be removed or moved. That is on me, I live down the road. So in conclusion, Lacey's Lunchbox, and again, Lacey, I wanted to start this project after a dog who I just recently lost. She was a service dog. She worked with me doing animal-assisted therapies with kids. So wanted something in her honor and thought that would be a nice way to give back. And just simple goal to make sure that pets are well fed while owners may be in financial need.
Thank you, Kara. I have a couple questions, but from the board, do you have any?
I have some too, but go ahead.
I guess I really appreciate this, and I think it's great, and I kind of watch the free community fridges and the pet pantries and everything in Worcester as well, and I think that community driven, as well as their little free libraries and everything, the community driven aspect is really cool. Are you envisioning, how many are you envisioning? I think in my head, I was envisioning at least one kind of here in the center of town and potentially one over on Glenwood Road at the building on Glenwood Road. Because there's seniors that access that may benefit. There's also during the spring, summer, fall, a lot of sports teams and everything. So that's another highly trafficked area certain times this season.
Sure.
But I don't know what you envision. My other question is would it be like packaged food, as in like 5-pound bags or cans or whatever, or even like Ziploc baggies of food versus not just filling this tote with dry dog chow?
Yes. So all of the above. So for your first question, yes, I was envisioning one or two, however many the town is amenable to. My husband and I are building these, so we'll start with one or two. I think that's fantastic. And then yes, so the way that Central Mass Pet Pantry is doing it now is they are taking open and unopened donations. If the bags are open or the tins of food are not open, great, they go right in the tote. If they are open, of course, like the food is inspected ahead of time, made sure that it is not out of expiration, or not expired rather, and then in Ziploc bags, labeled and inside the tote.
Thank you. Harry, I think you said you had.
Yeah, question one, are you a nonprofit organization or is it just you?
It is just me as of right now.
Okay. I guess I didn't realize we had so many people who couldn't afford pet food in Rutland. Can you give me an estimate? Do you have any idea?
I can't give you an estimate of in Rutland specifically, but I know in Worcester County, from the feedback that I have gotten, it's a lot. It's unfortunately and fortunately, right? Because these pets have homes and that's fantastic, and a lot of people are really struggling.
Not to be critical, but I guess I'm trying to figure out, why do you have a pet if you can't afford pet food?
No.
Seriously, so I guess I don't get it, that we would put these things around town for people. I mean, do they get their dogs, you had a service dog, right? So you went around with kids. Do they get their dogs vetted? All that kind of stuff. Do they have money for that? So I'm just, because what I'm concerned about is, we're Rutland, we're very rural, we have a lot of animals here, including bears. Okay, and I don't want that food spread kind of dug out and all over the place and become a problem. So perhaps you've thought about that. You have.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't really speak to your first kind of dilemma because I think that is an ethical dilemma. There are so many homeless pets just across the state and the world. So on the one hand, if they have a home and a warm bed, that's fantastic. And on the other hand, if those owners are facing a financial hardship, then should you really have a pet? Well, I don't have an answer to that. My second perhaps idea down the road, Westboro has a pet pantry, similar in design, it's on a church, but they are specifically made metal boxes. So significantly more animal proof, also at the cost of however many hundreds of dollars. So perhaps down the road, if this did end up being a problem for wildlife, then that is something that I would potentially look into fundraising and implementing instead. I recall it was last year, we had a moose walking down the street. I don't know how frequently they would get into a box like this. Yeah.
I don't know, through the chair?
Name and address,
I
please.
know it seems kind of crazy, but I know a lot of people who are elderly, live alone, and an animal is a very emotional need.
Sure.
It's somebody to talk, something to talk to walk, to have something to do with. And I don't think a lot of people who get attached to an animal realize the cost of veterinary bills today, or the cost of dog food, which has gone up a lot, even cat food. But I think a lot of people have had animals for a long time, then they get in a position that they can't afford all that stuff. And there are gonna be a lot of elderly people in that spot.
And you're familiar with some of them?
Pardon?
Are you familiar with people in that situation?
I personally know, cause I don't have an animal, because I know I can't afford it, but I have heard of people at the senior center, yes, that need dog food or cat food, yes, I have. But I can't say how many.
Through the chair.
Yep.
You have hinted about putting this on town property. I have never seen an individual allowed to use town property for personal means. And I don't know if that's viable, so either we'd have to check into it or you'd have to get back to us, because I'm concerned about that. We don't wanna set a precedent. If you do churches or restaurant, whoever lets you, that's fine. But I'm concerned about it being on town property. So, Austin, do you have anything to say about that? At this time, or could you check into it for us?
Sure, I mean, I think that's why she's here, to ask for permission, right? I can just think of several instances, right, so Mr. Viner, who camps out for a little bit to raise money for, is it homeless veterans?
Yes. Yep.
Using town property, you know, he's camping there, right? We also allow nonprofit organizations to utilize town property for donation of clothes and textile and books. So behind this building, for example, there's a couple of bins
Okay.
that, especially I think on the book, it doesn't benefit the town at all. We don't get any money or anything from it. We do get, from Planet Aid, we do get a certain percent of revenue based off of tonnage on there, but this certainly wouldn't be unprecedented. I mean, the example of the book libraries that you see across in many other communities, you know, I think that's kind of why she's here, to ask for permission rather than forgiveness and just doing it, right?
And I think the Council on Aging has the garden area over at the property on Glenwood that is solely for senior use, to be utilized solely by seniors, for seniors, very exclusive in that, cause there had been conversations in the past about trying to broaden it into a more broad community garden, and that was not well received. So I think that and this would be open and accessible to the entire town or any individual passing through town that needed it, to no expense of the town, because if there were any concerns or considerations or anything, Kara has provided all of her information to be able to work with DPW or our office or whatever that would have needs.
Nothing except for Mr. Viner, who does this thing out in the common. We don't have that. If I look around town, I'm trying, and help me out, we don't have anything that's prominent, that's right out there, kind of in your face. Everything is kind of set behind or set off. Is that correct? Because I'm trying to think of, as you're going through town, it's a great idea, but I just don't want to see it kind of out there, like in the middle of the common. You know, so if it's behind somewhere or at the senior center, in the back, where it's not right up front or in the front yard where they can still drive up and get the stuff. That would be my only concern of where they're gonna be put, if we agree to it.
If I may, I think you would want it to be discoverable. You don't want people that need it to have to go hunting. And I'm not suggesting that it be in the middle of the common either, but right next to, you know, near the town hall or the annex, or I don't think it's looking at the design, it's not just an unsightly box, it's going to be nicely put together. I don't see any reason why that couldn't be next to the front door of the community center. It doesn't need to be hidden around a building out of sight, and that's the whole point, is it needs to be discoverable.
Okay. I think that people who want that will find out about it. It's not like, you know, we're driving by and say, oh gosh, I need to get some of that stuff. If we're gonna put it, it's gonna be there pretty much a lot of time. So the people will get out to see it. Again, people move into town to keep the flavor of the town that they like. And we don't wanna see things start popping up all over the place. That's kind of where
I
I'm
think
coming
that's what
from.
we would get with this. I think they would see a town that's trying to help people in need and be favorable to that versus shying away from hiding it and not recognizing that there are people out there and that we're trying to help people that do need it.
And having it a little bit more prominent, again, not necessarily in the middle of the common, but more prominently located, maybe even engage the Girl Scouts or something to paint the box in like a fun manner or something, but also it helps people realize that it's there and it's a resource available, even though I may not need it, I may know my neighbor could benefit from it, or my friend's friend could benefit from it or something. And so I think it also provides an opportunity for community engagement, and that caring for your neighbors kind of piece, as well. And so I think there's a lot of value to having it, again, not in the middle of something taking up.
Of course.
But and I think also having it in a more, where there's more foot traffic will help deter any wildlife, because they're not gonna come up if there's people constantly coming and going in these areas, whereas if it's hidden behind a building that isn't frequented other than for this purpose, that just to me seems.
Yeah, I think it could be a really interesting community initiative as well, as you said about the Girl Scouts. So the Westboro Pet Pantry, that is that more costly metal box, but that was a Girl Scout project. And they raised money for this, and now they keep it up. And I was a Girl Scout, I'd be more than happy to, you know, potentially look at getting involved in a troop with a
I
troop.
was thinking also Boy Scouts with Eagle
Yeah.
projects, or even,
Absolutely.
you know, so I didn't wanna just say only the Girl Scouts, but just
No, of
in
course.
general. And I know we have Sabrina's here and works as the secretary at Central Tree, and I bet some of the school initiatives, Central Tree used to have an animal shelter club that was really, really active pre-COVID, and so maybe if there was interest there, restarting that, there might be middle school support also, and it could potentially expand to having locations, if you were looking for additional locations at the schools as well. So,
Through the chair, one more question.
yeah, and then I see Carol has a question, so go ahead, Harry.
Where we're dealing with food, whether it's pet food or not, is this a health department issue? Does it have to be overseen,
No.
or,
I don't know if the Board of Health regulates pet food.
that's why I'm
I
asking?
think they only regulate human consumption, right? I think where the Board of Health may be interested is if it becomes like a unsightly issue and there's animals and issues there, but which could also be just an overall town issue, which I think we would have probably reached out earlier before it becomes an issue that there's something going on there, we've noticed an animal getting in. And then she also mentioned obviously in her note here that if the town requests removal at any point, we can remove it. So if it's becoming an issue, we can always reach out, and I think we'll have a good relationship with her. But to answer your question, Harry, I don't know if the Board of Health regulates things like this.
Is there any other department or board out there that would be affected by this?
Not that I can think of.
Okay, building, nothing,
No,
okay.
building's a structure over much bigger than this. I don't even know if this would be considered a
Okay.
structure.
I'm just trying to cover all
Yeah.
bases here.
Unless we're putting it on like a pond, which we're probably not Concom.
Right.
Not that I can think of, Harry, at the top of my head.
Carol, go ahead.
Carol Benoit, Turkey Hill Road. Just is still being discussed, but just, I'm sure you know it, I think somebody alluded to it, but St. Patrick's Church, Pantry does have pet food. I know that they were only open limited hours, but they also, I know, deliver to people that need it, so the pet food would be part of that. But a little bit of what Harry's talking about, I'm concerned about liability for the town, if it's on town property and somebody gets bad pet food and their dog gets sick. That's, take that as you may, but it's kind of what I would be concerned about.
I mean, we can look to see how Westboro has done it and Shrewsbury as well, but I think it's not uncommon. Worcester has the free community fridges that take human food for consumption. And I think that's more of a liability in a lot of ways.
Isn't
But
there one right up at the church in Paxton Center as well?
there might be, I'm not sure.
There's
But that's the church, right, so that's the church liability. I was just thinking of the town, if the town would be, you know, liable for anything.
Yeah.
That's, like I said, just where my mind was going.
I can look into, what Westboro does and even what the Shrewsbury Pantry does.
Could we look into our liability insurance to see if that is an issue?
Sure.
So it sounds like we have a few questions that we'll follow up with, and then I don't have a sense from the board. I have that it's definitely, I mean, I'm definitely in favor of it for sure. Obviously wanna make sure that the town is protected, but knowing that you're amenable to even going to work with the churches or, you know, as we kind of mentioned, the schools or whatever also, that provides an additional avenue for you. I don't know how the rest of the board, I'm not asking for a motion because we have outstanding questions, but just a sense for Kara if she's going to continue with the town side of things or if she should start going. Like I said, I'm all in favor for it and more of them in more places because I think there's a huge need. And it wouldn't be I don't see it as taking away from the St. Patrick's Food Pantry or even the Council on Aging Food Pantry because this is potentially even people who are interested in donating differently or a bit able to donate differently.
In our,
I can bring it up at St. Patrick's, see what the pastor says.
Yeah, I'm not sure how the food pantry works there either, so Kara, if you wanna reach out, I don't know. Harry?
as part of your piece here of how they're built, have you gone around the town and have you looked for sites where you'd like to see to put them? Or what the availability is, cause again, that's my concern. So if you could find places that weren't, what's the word, not obtrusive, but try to offsite a little bit, but still people to get to them. If you could find either one, I'd like to, next time you come, could you give us some ideas about that?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I would be happy to even take photos and document locations that I feel would be appropriate.
That would be great.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kara, for coming in and
Well, thank you
for
guys.
the thoughtful package you put together also and the work that you're doing for it.
No, thank you. I appreciate everyone's time.
And we'll be in touch through Tamika as far as kind of the next, we'll get some answers from council or whatever, and then, you know, when to expect next on the agenda, whether it's our next meeting or the meeting after, just depending on budget and everything.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving in, I think we have economic development here now. If we can, if the board is amenable to going to the town line welcome sign policy that economic development is proposing, and I believe they had a couple questions. Harry, I believe you were at the last meeting and had requested that this be on the agenda for our last meeting, it didn't make the cutoff. I had been attending the meetings and was not going to have this necessarily tonight, but figured we would do it tonight anyway.
Thank you. One of the issues that I requested, which I told them I would, is because there was a discussion about who gets the money, where does the money go, how does it get allocated, do they have access to it, and that stuff. And I felt it would be appropriate if we kind of clarified that for them, where it is on a town sign, that the town owns, about where the money could be put and over what oversight they would have over it. That was just one.
Austin, I'm not sure if you had a chance to talk, I know we had talked about, I think my understanding from my original meeting a few months ago with economic development was almost like a perpetual care account, but also an opportunity for, I think the businesses that are donating funds for the sign sponsorship would like to know where their money is going. And so some of it would be for the care of the signs, but I think economic development was also hoping to be able to reinvest in economic development in the community as well, so.
Yep, so we discussed this twice with our finance team. Simply put, the money belongs to the general fund. We're very limited in other funds that we can utilize for purposes that have been demonstrated or requested here. There's been examples of, for example, the 4th of July or other celebration type events. There's explicit statutes that allow for those type of funds to exist. We spent a lot of time talking about this and trying to come up with options for this proposal. But the special or revolving fund or perpetual care fund are not allowed by law and by the Department of Revenue. One thing that could take place, it's a little bit more complicated, is establishing a trust fund and designating trustees, if that's something that the board or the committee would like to explore. But ultimately, our recommendation is if the Economic Development Committee still wanted to do something like this, we are recommending that they, very similar to some other communities in the area, establish a nonprofit entity to receive those funds and have the controlling authority. That would require an agreement of the town to allow for the nonprofit to collect the revenues and maintain this. It would be sort of an agreement between the town and
Like an
the Rutland
RBA.
Business Association or something, right? Some other communities, I think Hubbardston and Gardner, for example, use the Chamber of Commerce as the agency to do that. That allows it to not come into the town general fund coffers, because once it becomes general fund, we're very restricted on what we can do with it, right? It falls to free cash and then we have to appropriate it for some other purpose. I know that's not the answer I think that the committee wants, but those are just a couple of options based upon our research and discussion for the board and the committee to consider.
Question? If the committee decides to set up a trust or a nonprofit, what control would the town have over that money?
Well, so if it's a nonprofit, zero, unless there's an agreement, for example, hypothetically, because it's still town property, just thinking at the top of my head here, right? If we set up maybe a revenue sharing model with the nonprofit, so for example, the town collects 5% of the sponsorship fee for admin, very similar to like what we do with our police details. When we do a police detail, or we have an outside agency do a police detail, we collect a 10% admin fee, which comes to the town general fund. But if it's a nonprofit, they receive the funds. We do not have control over a nonprofit's balance sheet.
On that, they're looking to do, so on the signs, what legal status would they have if they have to depend on the nonprofit to give them money to service the signs and everything, or because the nonprofit gets the money, does that now revert back to the town where now we have to pay for the service and all that kind of stuff? Because the town doesn't have any money, neither does the committee, the nonprofit does.
Well, hypothetically, everyone on the committee could serve on that nonprofit
Work and do their
board,
own
yeah,
work there?
Or could work with that hypothetical nonprofit. The point is, it's an outside agency, however they wanna set it up, if they wanted to do that. And if the board agrees, right, because there's still an agreement that needs to take place between the town and whatever the setup is to allow for them to make changes to town property, right? So if they're putting official signage for a business sponsorship, the town still has to have some and reserve some rights for making sure that it's appropriate content, right?
Right.
Because it's still public property, unless you wanted to transfer that, which, you know, I don't think that's the right answer here, but,
Right.
does that answer your question? Probably not.
Kinda.
Okay.
My concern here is, I wanna see the EDC be able to do what they'd like to do, but I'm also concerned about the constraints or what is allowed by law that we can do that. And I don't wanna step outside that area, I don't wanna get into a gray area with it. So, if the town has been receiving money from these signs all along, it's going into the coffers, and we've had, I guess, DPW doing the signs, cleaning them, trimming around, or whatever, I don't know. You know, if that hasn't been done, we gotta get it done, if people are paying for those signs. And so now, all of a sudden, the town doesn't have that money. So I'm trying to figure out, we're going to say, okay, the money we have, we're gonna give to a nonprofit.
So just to be fair,
So that's what I'm trying to
we
figure
don't collect
out.
anything annually, right? We collected one payment
Once he, right,
5 years ago, so that's probably been spent
Oh,
already.
it's long.
Most of it,
overspent
most of
it.
it,
right.
from our understanding, most of it just paid for the original.
Yeah,
signs.
so the original was to construct the signs, right?
Right.
I don't think they collected any more for any maintenance or anything like that.
Okay.
And we had an issue where one of the signs was damaged and we actually had to spend town money to repair and replace that sign. So there was the challenge there, right, because we didn't have a separate fund to be able to do that. But we didn't really make any money, we actually lost some money off of the initial investment, right? This is more of the 5 years is up, right? I think the committee is looking to have some sort of a economic development, public relations opportunity here. But understandably, they're looking to have a sustainable, way to maintain these signs and provide some other opportunities there. Which just unfortunately, the way that we're treated in terms of our revenue and expenses, we're limiting the ability to do what they're requesting. So that's, I think, why we're trying to come up with something creative here.
And I think the feedback I've heard from a few different business owners who have current sponsorship and would consider sponsorship again is they want to know where if they're contributing $2,500 for a sign for X number of years, they wanna know where and how that money is going to be utilized. And I think economic development thought we're trying to get our feet under us and do some promotion within town, but also to get the word out outside of town to small businesses. And so if there was a little bit of funding there that they could utilize for whether it's advertising initiatives within the community or small business grants or something longer term. I believe, I don't wanna speak for everyone, but that's some of the feedback that I've heard from different business owners who have current signage sponsorship and would like to consider future signage sponsorship.
The other alternative is you add a line item in the budget, right?
I was just gonna ask that, okay.
But we have to make sure that there's sustainable revenue every year, right? So if it's just one-time revenue in FY '26, for example, but there's no plan for revenue in '27, '28, '29, '30, then that's probably gonna be one of those line items that, because it doesn't have revenue to support it, is easier to cut, for example, right? So there's the challenge there.
So the DPW really hasn't been taking care of the signs, I don't wanna say it. So, I think I saw in here it would cost about, I think they said around $1,500 a year to maintain all the signs. If I read that, or $1,500.
I think that was just
I think that was just a rough estimate to reserve to make sure, to ensure if like one of the signs got damaged, that even if it was the sponsor sign, that we would have money to replace it type of thing.
Yeah, the 1,500 was to put into the Rutland Economic Development Fund, and then the 1,000 was to use if needed, because if one of these signs was gonna need to get replaced, it would probably be around a $2,000 price tag to replace.
For the whole Rutland side.
Right.
Right.
So like we wanna make sure that if something happens to one of those, there would be some funds to. But like your question of, or your comment of being within the realm of legality, so to speak. You know, we're kind of in this spot where like having our own funds and money would greatly help, you know, being able to provide businesses in the town certain things. But then staying a town, you know, committee, we have that, you know, luxury of being, you know, recognized and being able to, you know, kind of use the town rather than being, you know, the Rutland Business Association that is kind of like a off the map thing and, you know, it's,
I hear
it's not crazy out there, but it's, you know,
Yeah.
it's like the two worlds and we're all trying to combine this together because,
Yeah,
you know,
Again, my
we think besides these, there's, you know, other opportunities for income, you know, that we could get behind, you know, throughout the town with advertising mostly, but other things to do to, so the funds is trying to find where we can, you know, meet in the common ground here, so.
I've heard that a lot, so I understand. Again, my concern is the perception that we're taking the money that's supposed to be, because we built the signs, and giving it to a nonprofit. If we could give it to you, that would be great, to CIPC, to the EDC, but we can't, because it has to go into the general fund, so I guess the one thing, and Austin, correct me if I'm wrong, two things we have to look at here. One, is the board willing to agree to allow you to set up a nonprofit for town money? That's one, does the board allow? And two, are you willing to do it? Are you willing to go through all the tax and filing expenses and everything else to establish a nonprofit so that you can get the money back to the EDC?
And I guess I don't see it as the town giving any nonprofit the money. It would be more of an agreement between the town and the nonprofit to basically say, we're authorizing you to take over these signs that are on town property, whether that's an RFP or some sort of grant agreement or something, that then, to Austin's point, would be maybe a 5% administrative fee back to the town on whatever is collected or whatever, but that essentially, we're not saying that these are, that they're town-owned signs anymore, essentially, that I think we would potentially consider transferring that ownership to the economic, or I'm gonna say the RBA, but yeah, the nonprofit, that then, and it would be some sort of agreement that, yes, they're on town property for a 5% admin fee, or whatever percent admin fee.
Yeah, that's actually, you know, and thank you for mentioning Friends. You know, we have other town departments and organizations that also have a kind of a separate nonprofit wing, like the Friends of the Council on Aging, right, the Friends of the Library. I think even our K-9 has a Friends group. You know,
I think agriculture does.
yeah, so, you know, so
But-
it wouldn't be unprecedented, right, for a town.
Well, do they raise,
That relationship.
does the town give them money, or do they raise their own money, is my question.
So like, for example, the Friends of the Library, right, you know, they sell books. Like the book bin I just mentioned, right, that revenue goes into the Friends account and they use
Okay.
that for, what do they use it for?
Right.
This book sale here, also goes into the Friends account.
Does Ag raise their own money? You said there's a Friends of the Ag Committee?
I believe so. I'm not on
Or
it, so I'm
does
not
it,
sure.
or does the town give them money?
Ag, if I remember correctly, Ag raises their own money. There have been instances that some of the Friends groups have gone before town meeting for free cash, I believe, to ask to have it. And I don't actually, no, it may not have been the Friends of Ag group. It may have been Ag directly when they were setting up the Ag, no, not the greenhouse, the Ag account.
Gotcha.
Per MGL. Remember there was that was a few years ago, before you were here. And I think I misspoke, I don't think any of the Friends accounts have, but to Austin's point, the library, with the book sales, I think Recreation has a Friends of group, the K-9 and
So,
COA.
and I guess that's it, so again, we're looking at a perception of the town, regardless by paperwork, at least the town is giving money to a nonprofit organization. They're allowing them to take it.
Well, in this case,
The businesses would give the Friends of EDC the money.
So, you know, Gibbs Realty would spend $2,500 as a donation to keep this sign up and running. And that would go to the Friends account, and then the EDC could then use it to pay a percentage to the town, use it for small business grants, use it for, you know, other things. Like right now, we have the, you know, Community Expo coming up, but we're all funding like all of our flyers and things, we're paying for that out of our pockets, you know? So it's not much, but it's something, you know, that if we wanted to promote, the goal of the EDC is to promote Rutland to outside of Rutland, to get people to come in here and, you know.
And assist existing businesses that may
And,
need.
right, and, you know,
ideas
somebody needs
or-
a startup fund, you know, that would be the basis. And we are gonna look at more avenues to get more funding, but the signs is every 5 years, that's something we know we have.
So I personally like the idea of going with a friends of or something, and then working with the town to essentially say, like, the library sells the books that come from the general fund, and that money then goes to the friends of group. So ultimately, we've paid for the, you know, the general fund's paid for some of, not all, some of those books, that then, after they've reached their end of library life, go to the sale. And that money that is generated from the sale or from the donation bin goes into the friends group. So in some ways, that's more direct to me than saying, we are essentially having this agreement with a friends of group to maintain the signs and keep them going, and essentially here, take it over.
Kinda like, I mean, you see, I remember I went to Fitchburg State, you see kind of like the garden beds that are sponsored by chambers and other nonprofit. It'd be a very similar arrangement, right, where
Yes.
they're
That's also in the proposal for,
Yeah.
to have things like
Gardner
that
does that too, yep. Yeah, I think they have like a downtown business association that does like the stuff in downtown Gardner, right? And they partner with the chamber, so very similar arrangement that we've seen in some other communities too, that, you know, whatever you wanna call it, whether it's Friends of, the Rutland Business Association, whatever you wanna call it, I'm sure you can come up with something creative, but. Yep, but you know, obviously, if we were to do this, there would be no money passing through the town, right? Cause as soon as it hits our books, we're restricted, so.
Right.
You know, I think probably what's been mentioned, right, is just having that agreement, probably in the form of a grant agreement with this organization to provide those services. And if there's a revenue share, great, if not, then that's something for the board to decide.
Jeff, go ahead, and then I know Carol had a question also.
So I think it's been brought to my attention that we have a quorum right here. And I don't know if I need to open a meeting for the economic development.
You can't, it wasn't posted.
That's what
It's not posted,
that's what I
okay.
thought. Okay, that's fine. So
Was this a question?
my question to the RBA that existed many years ago, I don't know how many people are familiar with that, but we used to raise money there and spend money, scholarships and everything else. How did that money come in and go out? Did they just,
Was that a separate organization?
That was a true nonprofit
Yeah, that was,
organization,
right,
it was a true nonprofit?
yes.
yeah.
I don't know if it was a total separate entity, it wasn't town affiliated at all. And this, a Friends of group or a business association would be the same, it would be a total non-affiliated group.
And if, go ahead.
But, no, go ahead, Jeff, go
And
ahead.
if you go through the chamber, which was mentioned, so we'd work with the local chamber, Wachusett chamber or whatever it is, the money would go there with the agreement that it comes back for scholarships or whatever, for the town of Rutland?
I'm not familiar with.
I have no idea.
I'm not familiar with how the chamber works, to be honest, and I think that they represent all many communities, not just Rutland and Holden, but I think it's greater than just the Wachusett district. I think West Boylston's in there also, I'm not 100% sure. So that would be a conversation with the chamber, but my concern there, I think, would be because they represent so many communities, is do they have the willingness to dedicate that this is Rutland specific? And I don't know the answer to that, that would have to be a conversation with the chamber directly. Carol, go ahead.
Just Carol Benoit, Turkey Hill Road. My familiarity with Friends of, it needs to be completely separate from the town. I would imagine something like, you could say that the actual burgundy signs, Rutland red signs are, the stewardship of them are handed over to the EDC. But you would have to have it a completely separate board. I know the library has a different board for their friends, the Friends of the Senior Center has a separate board. Money never exchanges hands directly, it's given into gift forms. So I think that it could work, but I think it needs to be so completely separate that there's never any kind of impropriety looking.
Right.
That's just my 2 cents based on what I know about Friends programs.
So it sounds like that there's no easy way to do what ideally I think EDC and I think at least I would like, I don't wanna speak for the whole board, would like to see for the funding piece. I don't know if you guys would consider looking into the Friends group and how that process would work. Tamika, Austin, I'm not sure if you have can offer guidance as far as establishing a Friends of group. I know we have COA has a Friends of. I don't know, Carol, if you would be willing to assist if needed or, you know, as a point of contact or whatever. If that's an option. I think the other piece that we have in front of us now also, and we're late and there's not a posted EDC meeting, so I wanna be mindful of that as well. But just, we had asked EDC to essentially look at our draft form of the policy in general, and I think a big piece of that was the fees and how to collect them and what they would be utilized for. But EDC has done a lot of work on it and kind of focusing it more on the economic development side and not the how much money can we raise for the general fund side. I think it's
Well, if I might, one of the issues I thought that we should discuss the money, because there were comments made that if we don't have the money, then we don't want the signs. We don't wanna take control of the signs if we don't have the money. So that's why I was trying to get the money issue cleared up first. And if I'm wrong, please correct me.
Well, I think that that's a consideration no matter what, is if we're asking businesses to sponsor a sign, how are we going to ensure that that money at bare minimum is going to maintain the signs for the life of the sponsorship of that sign? And so I think as much as we wanna get this policy updated because we're past the 5-year mark, I think we also want to work out the money piece because I don't think I wouldn't feel comfortable going to a business and say, hey, give us $2,500 for this sign, and it's gonna go to the general fund, and then if something happens to your sign, you have to hope that town is gonna allocate that from general fund because you paid it. Like, at that point, they can make a donation to the general fund and, you know, and the signs could just be not sponsored or something.
Can't there just be a line in the general fund budget to maintain the signs?
But it has to be appropriated.
It has to be yes, there can be, but given our budget constraints year after year after year,
But it would come from this income.
but not every year, they would pay $2,500 a year
Every 5 years.
for a
It's every
5-year
5 years.
span.
But say it's, then break it out that it's 500 per
500 a
year
year.
then.
Yeah, that's what I was just gonna say.
Just break it out,
Could-
I mean,
Could
But I
it,
still
could it be
think-
put in
but-
there, could it be put in there now though, and just say, like,
Right,
the
break it
total,
out,
the total
it's
collection
500.
is like 22,500, but could we put in a budget item for this year, knowing that this year coming up, we're gonna collect that money? And then that gives us till the end of the fiscal year, right, to figure out everything and get that money into an account, or is that not how it can work?
But even if that's the case, this is, to me, no different than the money that we get from the schools for the parking lot
Yeah.
maintenance. It goes to the general fund and there's no guarantee that that money is going to be used for the purpose that it's intended for. That's why I don't.
So why isn't it? Like, can't we just hire a contractor with that money that's gonna maintain the signs and sign a contract with, you know, XYZ Contracting, they're gonna weed whack around them and
But
whatever?
It's just like any other budget item, so in order for, we can't just say all of the money you might have is going into the sign budget line item. It has to get approved at town meeting to say, yes, we do that, but if we're in our budget constraints that we are now, there's no guarantee that this board or any other board would agree to sign off on even if you're getting it for that year, however much $1,000, that would go to that line item. It's just not guaranteed, it's all.
It probably would and I don't know for sure, but it could end up in like a DPW line item or something, like how the school maintenance income, rent income has gone into just a DPW line item that then is utilized but not necessarily tracked dollar for dollar. And given our budget constraints and everything, my concern is not necessarily the day-to-day upkeep of the signs, but more if there was something to happen to a sign, or we know that they're at their 5-year lifespan, so it's possible that, and I think the legs are wood, so it's possible that at some point they're gonna need repainted or new legs put on, or even the gold foil needs touched up or whatever, because they're aging, like all of us, right? And so how can we maintain that with income that, like I said, otherwise, to me, if I'm a business owner and it's going to the general fund, then I'd just be like, well, there's no guarantee that it's going to go to what I'm sponsoring for, and I don't want a sign that looks like junk because my name's on it, and the money that I put in isn't necessarily going to keep that sign looking nice. So I would either rather take care of the sign myself, or just donate the money to, if I'm gonna pay $2,500 into the general fund, then donate $2,500 to the general fund and be done with it, I guess, I don't know.
I think the maintenance is important, but the bigger picture, the economic development is to bring business into town from other areas, you know, like Sabrina has mentioned. And we're trying to think of a way to use that money, the $2,500, yes, some of it to maintain the signs, but to create scholarships for businesses in towns, or to help the businesses in towns, or to do something with the businesses in towns. And that's the piece that we need to figure out how we can control that. You know, we need to control all the maintenance and everything, but it just seems, and I understand government and I understand you gotta follow guidelines and stuff, but there's always a way around things. And we gotta figure that out, because if, as a sponsor, I mean, I get a benefit because my name's out there, but I'm on the economic, I love this idea that Chris and the group came up with, that to have a scholarship or to help businesses in town, that's our main drive. And if we can't do that, you know what? Let's not even do the signs. Take my name, take everybody's name off and just forget it. But what are we supposed, we're trying to grow business, and this is a way to do it. We have other ideas too of ways to bring money into the community to support the businesses. But if we can't do something simple like this, just forget everything else, because we can't do it. But you never should say never, because it can be done. We just gotta figure it out. You
We know it can be done, it's just either simple or complicated,
Well,
one way or the other.
so it's complicated, it takes us a little bit longer, but we'll get through it.
So I think you guys, have a meeting on Wednesday night, I believe, I'm not sure, Jess, I'm sure probably already has the agenda posted, but I don't know if
Yes.
you can add a discussion.
It's
I think
posted.
it's on
already
there.
on there.
Is it a discussion note of like a friends of or something
Oh,
group?
no,
The town line welcome sign
Yeah.
Okay,
discussion.
so-
but the welcome sign part is on there.
So maybe, I don't know, I don't wanna add more to the staff side, but if you can put together some info, and if the economic development on that is amenable to.
Town line welcome sign policy update,
Yeah, so
it's on there,
if
on the agenda.
our office can get together some info as far as the friends of, and the economic development is amenable to kind of moving that route, I think that might be a viable option, because I think we hear your concerns, and
I think the goal, one of the goals is to grow the EDC and not have an RBA come back, that it's a town, functioning committee, and not have to go like a rogue outside committee that can just do whatever they want.
And-
And raise money and give money back to, we would wanna say, the town of Rutland is giving $5,000 for somebody to open a business, not this side Rutland Business Association.
And I think because we often hear that Rutland's not business friendly and everything, that's a strong piece as to how to better merge that.
Question, if things don't work out for the Friends, doesn't happen the way you want, how do we disentangle that to get the money back to the town?
I think the EDC just doesn't have any part of it.
Do they write a check to us? I'm just thinking outside the box.
I think that's,
Putting the cart before the horse.
yeah, I mean, we're not even.
Thinking outside the box, that's all.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, so one, they haven't even established that they wanna do that yet. Two, we haven't even had those discussions with them about what that would look like, right? So if it was mutually agreed upon, maybe there's a language in the agreement that says if the Friends is ever dissolved, the Friends agrees to transfer any unexpended fund balance. But we don't have that.
But that would have to be written in their Friends that says if this thing is.
In a contractual agreement that we have between the town and the
Okay.
group, yeah.
All right, yeah, okay.
And we have other friends of groups, so I don't think that it's.
Yeah.
Alright, so I think unfortunately there's not an easy way to do what it is. And I hate to spend any more time on the specific policy just because I think the biggest piece is the funding piece. And so,
Talk on Wednesday.
I'm sorry,
No, good,
thank you.
thank you.
Moving on, if the board, I'm just looking to see who else is here, so, if the board wants to, I think the budget is important. Are
Yep.
you,
Yeah, we're good. I'll talk to him
okay,
at a Railers game. I saw you there the other day.
are you okay for?
I'm good.
Is the board okay to go to the budget? I would like, just for full transparency, I would like to get budget, the fee schedule review for the common vic, the IAC, and the Moses Howe and town report, and town meeting and state aid advocacy stuff. I'm willing to hold the draft policy review from Wachusett leadership group if needed. But the others I would like to get through, so, just for timing purposes. I believe, Austin, you have provided us with a few, the board has voted for a $2.1 million budget override, but the board has not discussed any kind of finalized cut budget. I was unable to attend the meeting on Thursday night, and I apologize for that with the schools. I watched most of it, I haven't gotten through all of it, because I've had a lot of other meetings as well, with work. But I think that both the schools did a phenomenal job with their presentation, and I appreciate their time and everyone else's time here and from FinCom that participated. Austin, do you want me to take it? Do you wanna?
No, I mean, so I'll just briefly introduce just a few comments. So obviously we had our department presentations March 5th and March 6th based off of some of the feedback and comments that were received that night from board members. I also had a separate meeting with Harry. He stopped by the following Monday and we spent a few hours going over the lines, and he had some recommendations here as well. We have prepared a couple of different options, 2 additional options for the board to consider in terms of a reduced budget. So what you'll see, and the quickest way to identify them is the front page. You see V2 and V3.
Is that something we have access to?
No, not yet. So for V2, you'll notice the bottom line deficit is about just under $250,000. And V3, the deficit is just over $10,000. Now, that's a big difference there. Obviously, V3 is a bigger cut to try to resolve deficits. There's a few similarities between the two. So in looking at some bargaining agreements and also just having discussion based off of some of the feedback from the board and also from town departments, modifications to some of the hours reductions for the clerical staff. It was also impressed upon by the board to try to minimize reductions to departments that also receive revenues for the town. For example, the inspectional services department. So we were able with both of these to restore the salaries for the inspectors for that particular department. but ultimately, there's some tough decisions that have to be made in both of these budgets. So we're talking about additional reduction in funding for public safety, for public works, and in the extreme one, reductions in expenses for the Council on Aging and library services. So high level, obviously happy to go through some details. I just, as I mentioned in my note to the board, I just wanna be mindful, obviously, we're talking about people, so I'd rather talk about policy at a high level than about positions and people. But I just, I think that covers high level what these two budgets offer from a policy level that the board has discussed.
Thank you, Austin.
So now, sorry, Madam Chair, you've got 3 cut budgets and you have a half and half cut budget. So you've got 4 options here to consider, all with varying levels of service reductions, some very major, and some trying to minimize the impact as much as possible. But there's no other way around it. When you're talking about $2 million, it impacts the organization across the board. And some more than others just because of their size and impact.
I do have a comment here. I know we slashed a lot of the stipends, but I still see there's 500 here for the select board.
Yeah, that's honestly, that's an oversight on my part. Talking
Okay.
about all the other line items, I forgot to.
So that has been cut.
Yep.
Okay, good.
Or can be. It's not cut obviously in these documents, but it can be.
Okay.
I think from,
So all stipends, right? Yeah. To be honest, I've been focused on all other departments and expenses and salaries. I forget about you guys. And that's not trying to like get a contract renewal or anything out of it, but.
I guess I've been swamped at work, and so I saw your email come in, but I haven't actually read through it at all. But just kind of looking at the bottom line numbers, and the, my stance as far as not using free cash, because we don't have the free cash, I think we have become comfortable using free cash and expected. And I worry that the past few years, we've had a increase in free cash based on some of the COVID outcomes and everything. And I worry that that's not going to have the same windfall year over year. And so I really am, we had the conversation about when we were discussing the number for an override and how much free cash we were willing or not willing to use for an override. And so we decided for that, we didn't wanna use any free cash and we wanted to start fresh with an override. And I have a hard time setting us up next year using, this year, I think we're at $450 or almost $500,000 in free cash the current fiscal year. And I have a hard time putting free cash kind of towards anything. That's just my initial look at the bottom line numbers. I'm happy for conversation with the board.
Would you go back and refresh what you said, that Council on Aging was substantially cut? Did I hear that right? Would you explain that one?
Yeah, so that was based off of a suggestion and a comment from one of the board members at the last meeting. So I wanted to show what that looks like. Obviously, what we need to discuss, if that's something that the board intends to pursue, is how do you still cover some of those essential services like Meals on Wheels and some of the outreach. So because it's contractual, there's still obviously hours for the outreach coordinator there. So we'd have to discuss that with the board about what that looks like.
Can you explain what you're proposing to cut from the Council on Aging?
So I'm
in
not
that
proposing
budget?
anything, to be fair, right?
Right.
Just trying to
The
give,
right word.
yeah, well, so, cause here's the thing, right? We're talking about some hard decisions and recommendations from a policy perspective that the board needs to decide, so, there was a policy proposal to reduce the director's hours and all the purchase services and supplies. So here's a policy document that reflects that.
And how much money is that reflecting?
85,000, give or take.
So I guess I kind of look at it from a policy perspective, is the board comfortable knowing that if an override were to fail, that we would have significant cuts and still need to put about $250,000 in free cash into the budget? Or that is still going to set us behind next year, right? Or is the board comfortable with more cuts that would lead to about $11,000 in free cash potentially? Obviously, those numbers are ballpark numbers. So to me, that's kind of where we are. What's the board's pleasure for free cash at this point? Austin, I don't remember off the top of my head, and I apologize, the kind of version 1 cut, I think that was closer to, that would still reduce a lot and put in, was it 500-ish, 700-ish in free cash?
So, let me just do that math. So, the version 1 cut has, we have a $205,000 deficit in version 1. So that was the original cut budget that was presented.
Yep.
And is available online. That
Yep.
was presented with our regular operating budget.
Yep.
So the deficit is 205,000 there. The V2 budget, which restores some money back to town departments, the deficit is 247. And V3 obviously has more cuts to try to reduce the deficit, has a $10,000 deficit.
And we have 900, I'm gonna round 950,000 in free cash right now. We know we're currently 117,000 deficit snow and ice that's gonna have to be covered. We don't know what our free cash is going to look like for fiscal year 25. We know that the past couple years, we've had some infusions from CARES and ARPA and everything that has kind of helped bolster some of that unanticipated revenue side of things, or helped with the expenses. And so I am cautious that we are going to continue to see the free cash dollar amounts that we have the past few years. And we know, I think, Harry, from a CIPC perspective, we know we have some capital stuff that needs significant addressing as well.
Yeah, but we pretty much, I mean, we've used a lot of the capital money, and I was sat down with Austin and I discussed on road. I don't think it's gonna have a material impact on our overall cash flow position.
I mean, so the
You know.
proposed capital plan, obviously, depending on how the override goes and which cut budget, I would anticipate significant reductions in scaling back that capital plan, right?
Right,
So,
right.
we are proposing to do significant capital investments, especially in public works equipment, which you see in the draft warrant. But, if we're using a lot of free cash for operating budget, we'll definitely scale back what we're spending on capital.
I don't see any funding source for any of those capital projects.
Yep, so to give you an idea, and you won't because the capital plan's not finished yet, but you just see dollar values, right? But, to give you an idea, the free cash plan, obviously this is still subject to, final approval by CIPC and the select board, but the capital plan invests $700,000 in free cash. After our contributions to our general stabilization, capital stabilization, and our OPEB trust fund, we have 142,000 remaining, which is similar to our policy where we wanna leave a little bit left for next year as a reserve.
And does that take into account the current snow and ice deficit? Obviously, sometimes we can
No.
shuffle money around in existing accounts, but then that impacts next year's free cash,
Yep.
right? And so it's a,
Yeah, so it's a little early to predict what our turn back's going to be, right? Cause we still have a few months left, yeah, right? And not knowing if there's any more snow and ice expenses, I suspect we may have a few invoices left, but the board obviously did allocate the remaining of ARPA to the education, so that's gonna fall, that'll probably cover our snow and ice deficit, so it's really just relying on town departments and excess revenue to generate whatever is remaining for free cash.
If I might, I'd like to, you mentioned that a member spoke about the Council on Aging. I would like the member to explain why they're firing the director of the Council on Aging, because I see no money here. Why we are getting rid of that position entirely? Because I don't see anything here on the V3 budget.
That was me, and I brought it up as something for discussion, not specific to the Council on Aging, but any, what I called at the time, non-essential services, which to Austin's point, we're still gonna require some because of the Meals on Wheels and all of that distribution that needs to be handled. But Council on Aging, some of the planning department, those are different compared to having appropriate police officers on staff. So just, again, it wasn't something I was dead set on having. I'm just saying if we have a cut budget, it's something that needs to be discussed, because even if it doesn't have any sort of cut in those areas this year, if the override doesn't pass and we're making these cuts, what happens next year when we have to cut another 2 million? Something is gonna have to go.
And I think we're cutting 2 million from about 8 million total this year of available cuts based on, everybody says it's a level funded budget, and we've kind of rehashed this at FinCom meetings. It's level funded with contractual increases, so it's not totally level funded because we've had increases on the contractual side. And so I think that next year we come in with a $2 million cut, or even if we have cut everything but put in, let's say $250,000 in free cash, we're still gonna have to cut another, we have the financial modeling, like we're going to have to cut more and more and more from that $8 million that we had accessible now to $6 million that we had accessible to after next year's cuts, it's gonna be $4 million accessible. And so I think for me personally, it's Rutland wants this level of services. We've come to expect this level of services on public safety, on DPW, on council on aging, on library, on all of our departments, but we have to pay for it. And it's unfortunate that the cost of everything is ballooning up and outside of the 2.5, but it's been that way forever, and we haven't gotten the state support. On our agenda tonight is some advocacy letters. I'm taking off work next week on Monday to go to UMass Amherst to advocate for the local legislation for the town and the school to work on local aid. And so there's advocacy that needs to happen, but that's not going to fix our deficit this year, even next year. And I see it as, since I've been on the board, we've had cuts. Okay, we're gonna put back a little bit, but it's not.
Cut it 2 years later.
Right, and that's where we are right now, and that's a little bit why I say I'm only looking at the bottom lines, I'm not looking at anything else, and I say, go ahead.
But to some of the point, and I appreciate the 25% cuts for, across the board for the clerical staff. But if this town is continuously not going to pass overrides, we need to make considerations of what positions should be permanently eliminated, because we're not going to have funds to, okay, for 1 year, we can hire you. Either that, or it's gotta be on a contract basis to say, we'll hire you for a year, because we have the money to do it, and it's not going to be a permanent position. There's no way that we can do that. I mean, we're talking about, Leah, you made the comment of even in a cut budget, the ability to afford the non-union staff their COLAs and step increases. I said last time at our last meetings, it does not sit well with me to see department heads keeping full-time hours and giving themselves COLAs and step increases and cutting all the support staff. That doesn't sit right. Those support staff never have equal opportunity to ever get to have step increases or COLA increases, because they're the first ones on the chopping block and the department heads get them. That to me is not equitable. So again, if we're not going to pass overrides, we need to start figuring out permanent position cuts and not making those available or making them on a contract basis when we do have funds available.
So
I just I forgot to mention, so just we did put that in there that the pretty much the department heads, right, all the non-union staff are not receiving the wage adjustments.
All the department heads?
Not receiving what?
Cost of living and wage pay increases.
Does that include the fire department?
Those are contract, well,
He's the only contractual employee that still has wage adjustment. In the case of myself, for example, the police chief and the town accountant, we proposed for me reductions, for the others level funding their salaries.
But not the police chief, okay.
Fire chief.
But I still have it's nice to reduce, but if we cut council on aging, we eliminate that, which department are we gonna eliminate next year on the director? Whose director are we gonna eliminate?
Harry, this is, and I don't wanna eliminate any of them, but this is
Well, I
why I'm
mean, but
saying
let's be-
this is why we need to fund our positions, and that's,
Well, if 2.5 doesn't pass, we are gonna actually tell 20% of this town that we're gonna eliminate what they like and do at the council on aging.
we may not have a choice.
Yes, we do,
There's
Jen.
no money, where's the money gonna come from?
We're gonna cut some other places then, come on.
You're
You
gonna
don't
reduce
eliminate
your
one
police and your
department.
fire staff? For
You
your
don't
public
wanna
safety?
eliminate one department,
Well,
you can't do
and
that.
to be fair, this extreme cut budget not only cuts the positions that were requested, it also makes further cuts to their staff. So it does cut more and cut to the existing police and fire. Also, you look at the library, that has an impact for a large portion of the population as well. Significant service reductions there.
I mean, maybe we should
There's no
close
pretty
the
way to
pool.
say this, guys. We have a big problem.
right. The pool's
Right.
not funded by the general
You're
fund
gonna
at
have a
all.
bigger one
Doesn't
if you
matter,
cut
maybe
the
we should still
COA,
close
I'll
it.
tell you that.
What's that?
You're gonna have a bigger problem if you cut the COA out.
there you go, yep.
And you don't have to.
So,
If you wanna enrage the seniors,
So-
tell them we're gonna cut them and they're gonna vote for the override. It shouldn't have to come down to that, in my opinion.
Shouldn't, it absolutely shouldn't.
So then why are we doing that?
So-
We don't
We're not,
have
Harry,
to.
we're not.
so tell me to add, so Harry, or the board, please.
Okay, tell me what I don't see here then.
It's
You-
a
you- you see a way to try to
proposal,
re-
it's an option.
you see a way to try to, first of all, get you guys to tell me what to do, make a decision. So if you wanna add more back, tell me that, and tell me where either I'm gonna take it from in the budget, or that you're okay with increasing free cash for it. Like, I'm fine with that, but this isn't cutting $500,000, guys. We have $10 million in our budget, and we're asking to cut 20% of that. That's significant, right? And I don't feel comfortable with any of these cut budgets. Candidly, I don't even wanna present any of these, cause I think they're all terrible. Even the half and half is not good.
No, it's not.
So anything
But
more
it's
than.
better than this, but anyways.
Right.
Why don't we just allocate $67,000 of free cash to keep that position? We're not talking 200,000 or
Because
250.
it's a permanent position that should not be funded through a one-time source.
Well, so, but,
Well,
if that's hold on, Harry,
okay.
if that's a policy proposal, like, we can adjust this on the fly, and I'd be happy to do that, but I just ask you,
But
I really wanna solve this tonight, so
I
if
do
we,
too,
if we
and-
can work through this, if we're gonna add that back, I'm more than happy to, I think it's important. But tell me where to get it from, what, in terms of expenses or revenue.
And so I guess my point, and I've said this a few times, is to me, we have three options, and this is a policy perspective. I'm looking at the bottom line. How much, if the override fails, how much are we willing to cut and how much free cash are we willing to put in? Austin has provided us with three options because I think we had taken off the $1 million in free cash because that was going to clear or half clear both accounts and potentially impact our bond rating and everything. So we have a version 1 cut that was $205,000 in free cash, a version 2 cut that would use about $250,000 in free cash, and the version 3 cut that uses about $11,000 in free cash. So I guess from And again, I have not gone through because I am dealing with the same budget stuff at work as I am here, line by line to see, but how much free cash, if the override doesn't pass, is the board willing to put in at what cuts? I think is the very first question here. And the COA director sat here and told us that a large population of our seniors, not a majority, a large population of our seniors go to other COAs, not she said that
They could, I'm sorry, they could, but it'd be like sending our children to Quabbin and not paying for it. It's, they get money, we won't get money.
Right.
And I think to correct that,
okay.
that's not what she said. We have the ability on rare occasions, I think she was just being congenial, but
Okay.
it's not something that we could take advantage of with
And-
other towns.
And what
Yeah,
money
other
would-
than like, so, you know, we do host other towns, right? So Ocam, I know their residents, for example, love to come to Rutland because we got the space.
They come for one class, it's a Zumba class, and
Yeah.
they pay for it, so they use our space.
But, you know, and I think we're very welcoming, right? So we allow for that to happen. You know, I don't know, I've only been in a handful of senior centers, but, you know, there might be some other senior centers where it's a little bit more restrictive, but
Are we
Sorry if I
looking at
misspoke then.
what money we would lose? Like, is there money that comes into the COA that we would no longer get?
Yes.
well,
And is that also
no,
reduced
so
in-
we get a formula grant based off of the percent of seniors per most recent census, right?
So would
And for
we
us, it's
lose
about
that?
27,000.
I think it's $19 per
Yeah.
senior.
So would we lose that income?
That I don't know if it's similar to the library where if you lose your certification, you risk losing your
Right,
state
so-
grant.
so if-
That I don't know, I don't think so.
If it's 25,000 and you're cutting 50, you're really only cutting 25. Because you're losing the income.
Well, but we don't get income, it's a state grant, right? So we don't,
Would we still get it if we didn't have a director?
I don't know.
Well, that's something that would be important.
Well, to give you an idea, Ocam gets it and they don't have a director.
So who is someone is managing that money.
Yeah, I think they have like a coordinator or something very
So
part-time,
there would
yeah.
need to be someone managing that money in order to get it.
Well, and I think the proposal is to have an outreach coordinator to maintain the Meals on Wheels piece and everything working out of a different building, I believe.
And are you saying our part of the budget that isn't the schools is 10 million?
Give or take, yeah.
So I'm looking at, one of my questions was undistributed expenses is almost 4 million.
Yep.
So is that all something we have no control over? That 4 million?
So,
So,
Go ahead. no, go ahead.
Yep, so to give you an idea, and this is in the original budget book, it gives you an idea, you can also see on the budget
I'm
page,
looking
it
at
tells
in
you,
the
right,
budget
so.
right now at page 27.
Yep, so just going down, Worcester Regional Retirement Assessment, we have zero control over, that's based off of our employees, and those rates are set by the Worcester County Retirement Board. So we get, every year, they give us what our assessment is gonna be. Health insurance is something that, you know, obviously is largely based off of the amount of subscribers. The board tonight will set the rates for FY '26.
So do the staff contribute to that?
They do.
So this 1.2 million, there's income that goes with that from the staff?
No, it's not income, it's, this is our proportionate share, so we pay 75% of health and dental, so this is the town's, this is the employer share, the 75.
Okay.
Yep, life insurance, as you can see,
Those were the big ones,
Yep,
actually, right there. So you have no control
pretty much.
unless you change the 75%.
Liability is also very limited on what we can control. And then obviously we can't control our debt service because we've already borrowed it and those are just paying back.
And where's the 190,000 that was ARPA money at the end of last year you put somewhere, but I don't really know where it went?
So that's not in here at all, right? Cause that's,
Where did it go?
so we used the remaining of the ARPA money to pay off this year, FY '25 school assessment. So we'll see that in the form of free cash at the end of the year, unless we have a crazy snow and ice budget and we have to cover that with our education line item, so.
We'll end up in free cash.
Yes.
So that's a huge.
Not 190, it was maybe give or take, maybe, I'm gonna round up and say maybe 150, but it was 105 plus some other unexpended projects. Paul, do you have any proposals or ideas?
Not that, and what I've been looking at and what you've been talking about is pretty much, to save a word, cut and dry, but at any rate, you know, it's a situation that unfortunately we're facing, and, you know, there's no simple solution to it, and, you know, it's come down to an override, and I don't wanna go back in over time again, but, you know, it's one of these things that the town needed to work on previous to this and needs to continue to look to develop itself better than it has, and, you know, it's just something that is an additional source of income to the town, so it's just, you know, it's a gross oversimplification, I realize that, but by the same token, these are the things that, in my mind, should have gone on over the years, and they really did not, and so, you know, every so often, yeah, the fairy would come in and bless us with a little bit of money, but, you know, it always comes down to running an override, which,
So, Paul, I guess to be a little bit more direct, if the override doesn't pass, what budget would you be comfortable with, and what level of services are you comfortable with?
well, I've been looking at the budgets this afternoon as they came down to me, and I was thinking probably number 2. Yeah, version number 2.
And it
Okay.
sounds like, Harry, it sounds like version number 2 is the one that you're most comfortable with, because that maintains the COA director. And I think it's the maintain, I mean, there's still very significant cuts, I don't wanna undersell any of that, but that maintains what I'm hearing is important.
I would say for myself, version 2, with 2 comments, I guess, there's still an increase, 6.25% increase for the dispatcher director salary. Is that staying in there? Even though it's not contract?
Yes, because it's regional, and I anticipate that we'll be moving towards the district, so whether we do it now or whether when it becomes a district, I anticipate that
Yeah.
will take place. You know, if you want me to level fund it, I'd be happy to.
And then my only other comment
Well,
is.
can I ask Jen, is that a proposal?
To me, if it's not, as we've stated, if it's not contract and it's not required right now,
So also the deputy director, which is in the dispatch wages?
yeah, if it's not contract, if that's what the board is deciding, is we're not doing COLAs or steps for anything other than contractual increases, it needs to be across the board, unless there's something that says it's
Okay.
required. Or, again, in the case of the police chief who's taking a specific volunteering his contractual to not get his contractual obligated.
I think there's a few that are contracted that aren't, I just wanna be clear that
Yes,
there's a few that are
There's a few that have volunteered not to take those,
Right.
but my other comment is,
So
I
that
don't.
reduces your deficit, right, sorry, Jen, just those 2 alone, you don't have a deficit. You don't have 10,000 deficit at all.
in the version,
In version
in version,
two.
Oh, I'm sorry.
in version 3.
Yeah.
Good lord, I'm
Version two.
confused, now we've got too many budgets, yeah, so it just reduces by,
My only other comment is, I'd like to hear the rest of the board's feedback, is I don't see how it makes any sense to have the town administrator reduce his hours.
so I'm not proposing to reduce my hours, I'm just reducing my salary. Let's be honest, do you really think that I'll be able to work less hours?
Well, but again,
The
to your
answer is
point,
no,
you've got
right?
another year on your contract. Whenever that comes, you're not gonna be here forever, we will never be able to hire another town administrator on a reduced salary.
Yeah.
As far as
So
I know, it's already not.
I'm not
margin,
gonna accept the
so-
pay, we're talking about cutting people, I'm not changing my budget for my salary, I'm not.
I already talked to him about it too, Jen.
Yeah, that's something, seriously, I feel very strongly about, like, we're talking about laying people off and reducing hours, and to me, it feels wrong that it's more,
A A moral,
a moral, ethical integrity thing for me than personal gain. And I'll die on that hill.
And I appreciate that very much, but again, the point I feel like I need to make is if we reduce the town administrator's salary by that much, and that's the expectation moving forward, when and at whatever point in the future, if Austin decides to move on, we're gonna have to account for a much larger salary in the budget, because we're never gonna be able to hire somebody at that salary.
and I think to Jen, and Harry, I think I had the conversation with Austin as well, and I fully admire this perspective from him, but also looking forward is really hard because it sets that precedent that we have a position and have the expectation, because Margaret did it also, she cut her salary on the floor a few years ago, that was then restored at the fall with free cash, but again, that doesn't help our structural deficit problem, and I think what I'm trying very hard to do is eliminate that structural deficit problem, and either we need to live within our means, and that means some really, really hard cuts, because our means are far exceeding our capacity to pay, and that's across the board. Name and address.
Carol Benoit, Turkey Hill Road, still. Two things.
You haven't moved yet? Out of town maybe?
Looking at it. To Austin, if I may, is the deputy director that you just spoke about, the dispatch deputy director, is that salary still on grant? Okay, thank you. Cause I knew we brought the person in on grant. The second that may help a structural deficit policy are the contractual wording for people that we contract with. Is there wording, that ties salary and benefits, et cetera, to the budget? Example, wording that says if there's budget cuts, if budget cuts
Like per
equals
appropriation or per allocation or something?
something. Cause I think we just looked at 1, 2, 3 salaries and it just took the bottom line in a much better place. So
I wouldn't say much better, please.
Well,
From
there was 2 minutes ago, but I mean, yeah, anything at this point seems like
Right.
a win, but I just would encourage the board to look at contracts going forward and making sure that we covered ourselves in that.
I think if you look across and not just in Rutland, but if you look across the state, and the country, the push to unionize is high. And the push to unionize in favor of employees, now whether it may only be a COLA, and I say only because, but the push for that job security is really, really high, especially more and more and more. And I don't foresee that getting any better. And so I wanna be mindful of the fact that we had to establish a new union in town, partially because of our historic issues treating those individuals much, much differently. And so Austin has tried hard to move away from contracts in general. Nights like tonight are gonna push any new employee coming in as a department head to demand, or a second in line, regardless of what position, to demand a contract, because they have no surety. And at least then they would have the option to say, I will forego this, but it's not us that would have the option to take it away. And so it's setting us up, again, we did this to ourselves 20 years ago, and we're still continuing to fight it, and that's part of why I kind of want us, as painful as it is, and I sit here and I hate saying it, and I hate looking at what it's doing to town, but we've been doing this for 20 years, and we're only making it worse for ourselves, and until we come to the realization somewhere that either we're gonna have to pay or we don't have it, and we can continue the state advocacy, I'm not losing that piece, but that's not gonna be a Band-Aid, and we've learned we can't rely on the state to fund us, right? And so.
But to that point too, though, the state's money is still our money,
Right.
it's just a little diluted.
Right.
And just a comment, and I know that it's on the agenda, but I was just looking at the 25% for health insurance. I'm paying twice as much for my health insurance for comparable policy. So, that's another place that needs to, I think, be looked at. And not that it needs to be that, but the other thing is where I was working, it's a tiered salary, so somebody that's making 35,000 isn't paying 25% of that 330, or paying that 330, they're paying a little bit, they increase it. There's another way to save the town money. The more you make, the higher your tier, the more you contribute, so.
We got hit with that, and I think in town, we don't have necessarily the broad ranges that a lot of larger organizations do for salaries, and so it was a huge, our health insurance at that time more than doubled because we were on the low end of the very low end of a higher scale. So I think that's mindful. I think the health insurance market right now is terrible, and I think the feedback that we got is that we were kind of fortunate as to where we are, that there were no other options that were really gonna be cost savings. There might be a 1-year cost savings, a slight reduction, but next year was going to.
Right, but I think that we need to look at the
Yep. The
split, the 25-75.
I agree with you, Carol, and I had a couple conversations with Austin. It sounds like the 25-70 split is pretty standard, but I did even suggest looking at 70-30. The retirement one, and I know this is the smaller side, but that one is higher for what sounds like the standard is, so that should be looked at as far as reducing that to 50-50. But I completely agree with you, and it's awful, but that's, I don't wanna call it a standard practice to put more of the premium on the employees, but it happens as a cost savings measure.
And just to add to that, so we did very high level explore that. One of the challenges that we have is all of this language is in all of our CBAs and some of our employment contracts, so we're gonna have to bargain that before we make those changes. And especially in a year where we're also bargaining layoffs. The reduction in the benefits is, something that I think we're gonna have to take a little bit more time to explore that. I know the school district is also kind of looking at possibly some changes there, so we're trying to possibly coordinate that. We'll have a little bit more of a discussion about health insurance in a little bit, but for right now, I mean,
Helps the structure,
definitely, yeah, it's definitely something we're looking at, right? And and for retirees, right, we still do 75-25, and there's a lot of cities in town that are 50-50 for retiree health insurance.
And that's where a lot of
It's
money
very
is.
generous.
Yeah.
So that's.
Yeah. To give you an idea, and I have this somewhere, our retirees projected costs for next year of that $1 million line item, it's about I'm gonna round up and say about $120,000 between health and dental insurance that it costs us.
So
That's for 25 retirees.
So if I'm hearing kind of from the board's perspective, it sounds like the version 2 budget with the level funding of those non-contractuals is the direction that we're going. Again, not necessarily looking specifically line by line, but just as a policy direction. For if an override were to fail, looking at, and I'm gonna just round up again, the 250,000 in free cash, and what that looks like, at least in the first pass of the version 2 budget. Is that what I'm hearing from the board?
That's kind of where I'm coming from. I mean, I hate it with a passion or even doing it, but that's thinking about it, but that's where I'm coming from.
And I just wanna be clear to the board, to the public, to everybody, that's still like setting us back years in town still, with the cuts that we will be seeing. So it's not a we can, and then next year we're still looking at
Everybody think about what's cut for $2 million next year, 'cause
Right.
that's where we're at.
So is there then a motion to recommend utilizing the high level version 2 of up to 250,000 in free cash to offset the most significant cuts?
I'll make a motion for that.
I'll second it.
Is there any other conversation? Roll call, Harry.
Second, aye.
Mattson, aye.
Whitman, aye. And Austin, does that give you enough latitude to kind of work within the departments? And I think FinCom wanted to have an idea.
Yep.
And now that we know, we can also look more detailed at everything, just if there's any shuffling.
That's good.
Is that one of the ones online?
Not yet.
I'll put it on the short thing, yeah.
And I have a question on dispatch, if I might.
Yep.
I thought I heard you say at one of the meetings that one of the salaries we pay 100%. It's not spread out to all the other towns.
Yeah, so that's,
Why is that?
I think, to be honest, it's just, I think how they set it up years ago when they went regional, because it's, you know, Rutland service, I think they always felt that they should pay, you know, 100% of the director's salary, so that's the salary that we pay 100%. The remaining of the, what you see in the general fund allocation is partially covered by grants and partially covered by, the other member community
So
assessments.
is that something we can change? Because why should we be paying the full director?
Well,
It is, I mean, so, but there's, you know, that is something that we can change, we're also trying to have some active discussions, I have another meeting this week to convert it to a district, which allows us to grow the service, so our, like, just to give the board and the community an idea, if this happens and we do expand, our assessment goes down to below $200,000. So there's significant budget savings there for the community. That's something that is very real and we wanna continue to grow and have momentum on. That, you know, that's obviously something that if we're talking about allocation of resources, we can do here too.
And who pays for that, the building expenses for dispatch? Is that, everybody contribute to that, or is that just on us?
So, yeah, so, we do charge, indirect costs to the communities as a part of the overall budget, so it's, you know, it's not much, cause if you've ever been in dispatch, it's, this room is bigger than our dispatch center. You know, so we,
Very dark, so not a lot of electric.
yeah, so, to be honest, we probably get more than we should. But we do charge indirect costs to the communities for health insurance, facility costs, some other salaries, like treasurer collector and our accountant, so we do get some
Money
additional
for that.
money in there,
And
yep.
do they have cars?
The director has a vehicle,
And
yes.
what does the director need a car for?
I refer you to the select board who,
He-
I think it was a previous select board.
I think-
It's because they have other tower sites, I think that's something that was negotiated into his contract, so we actually own the towers in Hubbardston, Barry, and we don't own the one in Warren, but we service it, so I think the director, as a part of his contract, negotiated getting a town car as he's 24/7 and has to go to these tower sites, so that's, I think, something that was
And is
negotiated.
that one of the costs that's shared?
No cost, it was an old police car.
I was gonna say, it was an old,
To answer your question,
Insurance
the
and
cost of
insurance.
maintenance and everything else is in his budget and is shared by the other
Okay.
communities, yes.
Thank you.
so I think, and I don't wanna harp on this, but I think when Rutland Regional Dispatch was created, there was a very strong want to maintain the Rutland ownership of it, and so that's why the dispatcher's salary was completely Rutland, because that maintained kind of the Rutland ownership of it. Now, as more communities have come in and everything, but that's a very long process with the negotiations with the other member towns and everything also.
Okay,
So, and knowing that the hope is to go to the district model. Good questions.
thanks.
Moving on, we have the fee schedule review. I believe, if you recall, a few weeks ago, we had looked at some other fees, and Tamika and Austin had mentioned that they may be coming back with the common vic. They needed to ask town council. We had accepted a MGL that allows just the select board to increase these fees as recommended. Tamika, Austin, I don't know, I mean, we have it in our packet, I don't know if you wanna speak specifically to it. But again, it's just kind of looking at the cost of advertising and administrative and everything, and our fees, our current fees, we're not covering that. So we are going with what MGL allows. And I think surrounding communities are in the same. So it would be increasing the common vic license from $50 to $100 for a full year, and then if it were a half year, keeping it at $50, right, Tamika? So because it's a half year, half the cost.
Can I ask a question? If it's a half year at the $50, do we still have to pay the $64.32 for the legal advertising? So can we just call it $100 across the board? Because regardless of how, we need to cover the cost of doing the administrative side of it.
Or move it to 75,
Move it to
something,
75,
yeah.
something.
Yes, the board can do that. A couple of years ago, the board made the decision to go with a 50-50 model for all of the fees on your schedule. I would probably argue the same for an auto dealer license. I don't think it's impactful for a liquor license because obviously the amount that we collect. But I might recommend that if you go with that option, we should probably do the same for an auto dealer license as well and keep it at $100 across the board, cause again, it's $50 for half the year, which would cover the cost of the
Is
advertisement.
that the same thing? Yeah, then I would say that needs to happen for both. We can't just,
I know, we're cutting everybody, we
Yeah.
just can't throw the money
I would
away,
say
so.
make it $100 across the board for, can we do that for tonight for the auto dealer as well?
It's included in your motion.
And the board's comfortable keeping everything at 100 full across and not saying 75 for the half, 75, I mean, there's still administrative fees and everything, for the newspaper, the legal ads and everything.
At the rate inflation is, and at the rate things are rising, we make it 50, we make it 75, and in 2 years, you gotta come back here and make it 100. You
I don't
know, I guess
disagree.
that's my concern. So just,
Very real, yep.
Alright, so then I would entertain a motion.
I'm sorry, did you have a question,
I
Karen?
was just saying, do 200 and 100, I mean,
You can.
MGL only allows 100,
Only, yeah,
up to 100,
they need to
sorry.
update there.
okay.
Alright, so I'll say I move to adopt I move to adopt an updated fee of $100 for the common vic licenses.
Regardless of
Date of issuance. As well as auto dealer. Is that how do you want to,
Yeah, and can you just add retroactive to March
Right.
first?
And it's all
and
auto
dealers.
dealership, right?
Yep.
All.
Like, we charge the same fee for all classes.
Yes, that's what I was trying to say, I
Yep,
just can't speak.
regardless of date of issuance, retroactive to March 1st.
We have a motion, is there a second?
Second,
Any other conversation? Roll call, Harry.
second and I,
Mattson, aye.
Ledger I.
Whitman, aye. Moving on, the special act to recall elected officials, we got kind of limited feedback from the town clerk and the planning board, which has been included. I know we just got an email from a charter committee member saying that the charter committee is requesting to have it added to the charter and not to as a special act. I don't know how the board feels, but I think continuing to move forward with the process at bare minimum, if it gets placed, then it gets placed, and if not, then it's a legally defined package to hand over to the charter committee. We don't know as far as the timeline of the charter or anything either. The planning board had recommended a cooling off period be 1 year instead of 2, which I believe was a conversation that we had. And I think the town clerk had some concerns, which I think we had kind of asked if what legal's opinion on some of those questions were also.
If I may, I agree with you. I am 100% fine, and I think we should have the charter committee review to include it in the charter. But there's no guarantee that the charter is going to pass, so I would also say we need to continue on this path and have this put into place, and it just, again, kind of puts things in motion and even more solidifies it for a charter if that's not in place yet. As far as the other comments, I don't think I have any issues with the cooling off period. Like you said, I think we had talked about that. Some of the clerk's other comments, some of them I think we had brought up. Some of them with some of the language and whatnot that's in here all came from legal, is my understanding. So I'm assuming we'll get feedback based on, what they tell us, but I don't think I have any significant feelings on.
Through the board, do we include, Anita had sent some stuff. Do we include her comment about, what did she say here? About the section, where the, grounds for which a recall can be made? And she wanted us to include, the ethics, but there is a part in here, number 3, a finding by the State Ethics Commission following a proceeding, which would trigger that. So, or do we just reference that in this section?
So I think that was one of the questions for legal was, correct me, Tamika, if I'm misremembering, one of the questions I believe for legal was, can we just pretty much take out any rationale? Because a lot of it is covered under ethics, as well as other MGL, because even the examples that are given here are just already saying, that could be, but are not limited to. And so.
Yes, that is one of the questions on the list that we are gonna send to town council.
And she even put the comment in here that she thinks it's wiser to be less specific, which seems to be the way that we were leaning as well, so.
So I have a question, a legal question, I guess. If we don't include GL 30A sections 18 through 25, GL 268 section 4, this is what governs that. How will this be interpreted to say, how do I do this? Under what things do I do if we don't show them something in here about what Mass General Law or what Ethics Commission has to say about this? We don't have to list all these things, but we should be putting in under the sections that apply to this.
Well, I think that's some of the question from legal is how to phrase that section
Okay.
to make it more broad, but also inclusive of the information needed.
Right.
And are we okay with the 1 year then? On the remove from section 9,
So, I mean, I think planning board
section,
had asked that we consider 1 year instead of 2. I know that was a point of conversation when we as a select board had looked at it. And so I think if we are comfortable, I personally am okay with the 2 years, but if the board is amenable to the 1 year, I am not going to.
I'm of the same frame of mind. My preference is 2, but it's not a hill I'm gonna die on. If the board is, majority would prefer to have it be a single year, then.
well, I guess I'm looking at one comments that we've had from other sources say 1 year, so, I mean, I would say 1 year, I'm not a hill I'm gonna die on either, but I think that is I don't know if you wanna call it a fair option.
I think my thinking on it was, again, we're talking about something really grievous. There's a lot of signatures and a lot of votes that need to happen to get something like this, to actually remove somebody from office if this were in effect. So if it's that grievous of an incident that the town voted to remove that person from office, to me, 2 years where they're not appointed to any other board or committee does not seem outrageous to me. It's,
I mean, I look at it as, okay, all we're talking about is appointment. This individual, if they're kicked off of an appointed board or they can run again. Nothing's gonna stop them from running.
Well, so this is
So
only
if-
for elected,
this is only for electeds though.
No, huh?
This is only
Yeah,
for electeds.
I know
We're
that.
talking about they shouldn't
We're
be on any
talking
other
about
board
being
committees.
appointed to
Right.
somebody. But if they can run again, anytime within the 2 years, then why does that 2 years even have an issue?
Because we can't say they can't run for elected office.
you don't control the voters.
But
Good point.
I still think, you know,
But as a town,
Yeah,
if somebody was removed from an elected office, I would prefer, I guess I don't mind having it to say you shouldn't serve in a volunteer capacity on another board. If it was that bad that the town voted that you shouldn't even be in elected office.
but some of these things to get diselected, so to speak, aren't that bad. They aren't that bad. If you violate the ethics code, that's not like some of the other stuff you got on here. So you didn't read your ethics stuff or whatever, and they found out about it, you didn't do anything about it, so we're petitioning to have you not elected.
But that's assuming also that
That
it's,
doesn't rise to a 2-year occasion for me, so I'll just let you know, I'm okay going to 1, okay?
It's fine with me if that's what we wanna do. Like I said, I wouldn't go any lower than 1 though.
No,
so are there any other comments other than the changing the 2 year to 1 year? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to send the special act to recall elected officials to town council for review with that one revision, and the other questions, considerations that we've had as we discussed previously, Tamika.
we don't we don't need to, Anita wrote, it said, should indicate it's a 2-part process. We can redefine that without the attorney, right? He doesn't have to approve that, or do we have to do that before we send it over to him?
I would rather send the document that the board is comfortable with for review to eliminate the number of times we go back and forth with it.
Yeah, I wish Anita was here to explain what she meant by this.
But I explained to her, and she indicated that in her email, I explained to her what that process was, and I think what she meant with the 2-part process, which I think is explained in there, is the first step is getting the papers,
Right.
and then the next step is getting the signatures necessary to get it on a ballot.
Right.
And
I
I
think it's
think
in
that's
here.
outlined in there.
I think it's in here.
It is, and I think, I mean, this is a legal document. Legal documents are never clear, so if we ever get to the point where this passes, I'm sure we can come up with some user-friendly language that would explain what it is that we
Like a
can put on the
roadmap or
website.
something.
Yes, exactly, explaining it.
Okay,
But for the legal documentation, this is what seems to be pretty standard for.
no more discussion for me.
So I would entertain a motion as I had stated to send the special act to recall elected officials to town council for review with the change from the 2 year cooling off to 1 year and the additional comments throughout the select board's review.
So moved.
Is there a second?
second,
Is there any other comments? Roll call, Harry,
Selectman, aye.
Mattson, aye.
Whitman, aye. Moving on, I would like to at least right now hold the draft policy review because we had promised previously that we would do the Moses Howe Award and the annual town report. And I think we need to open the town meeting warrant and look at the state aid advocacy. So already that it's not quite 8:30, if we can blow through this, then we can at least read through the Wachusett Leadership Group and if we have questions, but otherwise, moving into the Moses Howe Award.
Leah, I think you accidentally skipped the insurance advisory committee.
I did, thank you. And it wasn't intentional, thank you for calling that out. So we have the Insurance Advisory Committee, consider the recommendation for the fiscal year 2026 benefits plan. We have the recommendation, I'm not sure that I saw it printed in our packet, but
It's in there. It's like a 3-page document, cause Nick also included the information from Harvard.
I got it.
I see it online. Austin, can you speak to it while we're digging through our
Absolutely.
sorry.
So the IAC did meet, just a few weeks ago, the IAC, which includes representatives from each of our bargaining units as well as a non-union member and a member of the active of our retired employees. After some lengthy discussion and feedback over the past, couple of years from employees, the Insurance Advisory Committee met with representatives from both Harvard Pilgrim, a current insurance carrier, as well as Maya, which is Blue Cross Blue Shield, to try to see if there was an opportunity maybe to go back to Maya or Blue Cross. This is a year, we were on a 2-year agreement, so this is our second year. So we'd be looking at an opportunity to maybe go elsewhere. What you see included in the rate sheet, and I can show that if you'd like, Maya was not really much better in terms of the rate offerings. They actually just matched what Harvard Pilgrim was offering, so it was 17.89 or 17.9% increase over fiscal year 25. Nick, our treasurer collector, just for the purposes as well, just to see what it looks like, also look to potentially raise, so do some plan design changes, raise the deductible from 1,000, 2,000 to 2,000, 4,000, which you see reflected here. What that does though is that, places more of a burden on the employees, right? The 1,000, 2,000 is actually already something that was new for the employees, that was implemented, changing to Harvard Pilgrim a couple of years ago. After discussion and also a little bit of strategy, the recommendation of IAC is to take this year, continue with Harvard Pilgrim, but they want to start early, doing some of the work that was mentioned by Carol and members of the board, to look at a couple of different options. So possibly a health insurance consortium, so there's a couple in the area that do that, and they've achieved much lower rate increases. The consortium can also mean working with the Wachusett School District and our Wachusett member towns, which we tried to do this year, but Wachusett is having an issue with their public employee committee. Long story short, the recommendation of IAC is, while they're not overall happy with it, they'd like to continue and take the time over this year to explore some other options, which also just includes maybe going directly to Blue Cross and not working through Maya. Some communities have achieved some better rates there. But this is the recommendation of the committee. These changes are obviously already reflected in our budget. There's no additional cost by accepting this recommendation. But this is the recommendation of the committee, and they're seeking your approval for FY26.
Does anyone have any questions or concerns or anything? I just wanna say thank you to Nick and the committee for kind of really trying to look at cost savings opportunities in a year that's not insurance friendly by any means. And I know that there's been a lot of conversation and frustration with the current plans. And so the fact that they're mindful of moving this year, what that might look like to impact next year if we were to join another 2-year commitment, I think is also, I thank them for that consideration also.
I gotta ask this question through the chair, please.
Sure.
Was there any indication that they had an appetite to accept a larger deductible?
No, as was mentioned, even from members of the committee, they looked at this, so you can see the rates, so there's gonna be a delay here, but where my cursor is, this is the increase, so what you see here is Blue Cross Blue Shield, 1,000, 2,000 deductible, which we have now, Blue Cross increased deductible 2,000 to 4,000, and then our current carrier, Harvard Pilgrim, 1,000, 2,000, 2,000, 4,000. So Harvard Pilgrim, doubling our deductible, we only see, let's say, a 3% decrease. And the thoughts was, well, you just doubled what I have to pay, and you're not really achieving that much of a decrease. And, you know, obviously the difference in Blue Cross is much larger, it's a 6%. But there's some strategy here in the recommendation, right? And I agree with the committee that I think that they can achieve better results by doing our insurance procurement, I guess, a little bit differently than how we've historically done it. You know, to give you an idea, we are working directly, like on our own, like we're not as a part of a larger group. Even being a part of Maya, we usually receive some benefits, with exception to the past few years. So to answer your question, Harry, yes, they've looked at it. This is what is reflected here in terms of what the cost looks like. But there wasn't an appetite, and that's not the recommendation or request of the committee to do that, especially the impact that they have. One of the biggest things that they're seeing is both on Blue Cross and Harvard Pilgrim is the cost of medication, so the prescription component to the plans, which is going crazy. And those are some of the largest drivers to the increases, aside from just the overall cost of health insurance across the country. But especially on Harvard Pilgrim side, the prescription plans were tremendous in terms of the increase. There was some concern and discussion about, I think members of the public and staff and the board probably recall some of the legal negotiating between Point32 Health, which is the parent company of Harvard Pilgrim, and Tenet Healthcare, which oversees St. Vincent's and UMass as well. So there was discussion there. People weren't pleased with the uncertainty about their insurance offerings. That has been resolved, but that, that is sort of top of mind too about, just because it's resolved now, is this gonna be a continuous thing that I have to worry about every few years? So if we were to lock into Blue Cross or Maya, we would have to lock in for 2 years.
Okay.
We wanna continue on just a 1-year deal with Harvard Pilgrim and take this time to do a little bit more due diligence, research, and find something that's more responsible for the town financially, but also still offers quality benefits for our employees. So that's their plan.
Follow-up question.
Yep.
Did the committee propose a different sharing model?
No.
Did not?
No.
And the reason?
It wasn't discussed.
I would.
Nor was it,
I mean, from a due diligence standpoint, I would have thought they would have at least discussed it with them,
Yeah, they didn't. I think their frame for this purpose was they're not happy with their current insurance offerings. I think one of the thoughts on the treasurer's side was because it's gonna take a little bit longer to bargain the split, 75-25 split, was to try to see if there's a benefit to raise the deductible. So that's why you see, the different costs here, but it didn't come up during their discussions. And I'm not aware of any discussions that happened outside of that meeting.
I also just wanna say,
Sure.
our previous, not last year, but I think the year before, a couple years ago, the town did not listen to the IAC recommendations at all. And essentially IAC was told one thing and then select board was told something different, and there was a huge disconnect, and that was a really sour taste. And there was a year, I think, that, Tamika, I don't know if you remember, that IAC was considering not making any, didn't wanna make any recommendations, didn't wanna engage at all. And so the fact that we're back to having conversations and being able to talk about looking at deductible amounts and everything, and not automatically locking into another 2-year deal, I think is huge strides over where we were just a couple years ago, or a few years ago.
And we've got some opportunities, we've got some work to do, right? So there's some towns that the more expensive plan, the less share the town covers. Obviously, we don't do that, we're just flat, both retirees and active employees, so with some more time and ability to look into this, I think we can probably find something that makes sense. But again, on that side, we're gonna have to bargain a lot of that, well, most if not all of that.
And to Carol's point, looking at the salary ranges, but again, I'm not 100% sure that in a smaller municipal community that we have that the diversity in the wide enough diversity in salaries to make that a viable option, but not, I don't wanna take that off the table either. And I also don't know if municipalities could even look at the GIC or something. And I know that oftentimes that's not necessarily a better deal, but sometimes it could be. So just as another avenue.
And sorry.
No, go ahead.
Just to give you an idea, so we did a survey with towns in the Commonwealth. Athol is an 18% increase. West Boylston is 10%, Beckett is 16%, Milford 9.9%, Lee and Lennox are 15%. Gardner is 16%, Tingsboro is 17%, so all across the board here, from whether it's Maya, self-insured, direct procurement. Some of the best ones that I've seen are the consortium procurements, so more localized procurement. So that I think is something that probably would be most attractive to a town like Rutland, is to work with towns close to us and do some sort of a larger bulk. And the best way to do that is we get one of the school systems in with us, because they just have much more employees than we do, and it's a larger area.
Maybe that's something we can discuss next year if we develop this.
Yep.
Wachusett.
Yeah, well, and we've already, we actually tried to start that early. I remember reaching out to Holden and Wachusett superintendent and seeing if they're interested. Holden kind of took the lead on it for us to look at that. They worked with their insurance carrier. The challenge that, as I mentioned earlier, that we're having is that the Wachusett Regional School District has a public employee committee, which makes it very difficult to modify the insurance offering. So I know that Wachusett is working on that to try to make it a little bit easier, possibly dissolving that committee. I think, and Leah, I don't know if you have any information just from the school side, but I think they feel confident that they're closer than ever to get there, maybe. That has to be bargained, I assume, too.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of bargaining and everything that needs to go into that. It's and definitely not fiscally responsible for the town to consider adding individuals to that by any means. So as long as that exists, it would not be fiscally sound to consider adding a pool of individuals into that from the municipal side. But not off the table if things were to change there.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other conversation? Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to approve the fiscal year 26 insurance recommendations from IAC as presented. So moved.
Seconded.
Is there any other conversation? Roll call, Harry.
Second, aye.
Mattson, aye.
Ledger I.
Whitman, aye. And I just wanna thank Nick and the IAC again for the work that they've been doing and the willingness to kind of take a year, but hopefully start kind of now looking at more viable options. I think this year especially everybody, and I say everybody, but all groups were hit hard on the insurance side unexpectedly. And so that's been, and it's across the state, watch any meetings, it's been a huge hit for many individuals and communities across the state, so. Moving on, like I said, we will hold for right now, the draft policy review for the Wachusett Leadership Group, move into the 2025 Moses Howe Award. We were fortunate to have a number of applicants for this. I would like to just read the names of the applicants. We have Officer Brendan McShay. I'm going to mispronounce her name, I think, Kira Sullivan. Jeff and, I lied, sorry. For Moses Howe is Officer Brendan McShay, Jeff and Christy Gibbs, Peg Sullivan. I believe a number for Ruth Lowe, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 for Ruth Lowe. Tamika Murphy. Those were the Moses Howes, I believe. Am I missing any from the board? Does anybody see any that I missed? So the Moses Howe originally was established originally for public safety, and then it's kind of more broadly to community service. And it's Rutland residents or employees who have contributed significantly to public service from a volunteer perspective. Is there any comments, conversation, a motion? If you recall the Moses Howe, we usually, originally it was done the very first couple times, the week of Public Safety Week, which I believe is the middle of May. More recently, it's been done in the middle of June, kind of at the first concert on the Common Week. We've done it at that time. And it's a small ceremony presentation. There's a plaque that hangs in the Public Safety Building that the name is engraved with the year. So
I guess I have, can anybody tell me about what organizations in the town Ruth was involved in?
I think
I
if
mean,
you,
she's got a lot of things here, and when I read his stuff, it doesn't tell me much. It says Girl Scouts and some other activities, but it doesn't tell me a list of things, so various fire brigades. I'm just wondering if anybody has any idea of all the stuff she was in apparently.
I know she was very involved in Girl Scouts. I believe in a lot of the church work as well. And I think most of these are from the Girl Scout perspective. I'm just looking at the, she was involved in the fire brigade as well. I know she's just generally been active in a lot of the activities, including the 4th of July, it looks like.
She's lived here pretty much all her life, I guess.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
I mean, I think you have as much information, Harry, as I do based on the applications. I know all the individuals, but not in a stronger capacity than anything. So I said we have Officer Brendan McShay. We have
Has a police officer ever, or anyone from the police department ever been nominated for a Moses Howe Award?
Twice.
Yeah.
Twice, Detective John Sanji and
Yeah,
Officer
right.
Finuccio.
and
Okay, thank you.
And this is for kind of the past year, so in kind of looking at 2024 or before, so anything kind of that would have happened this most
Right.
I mean, as always, all the nominees are fully deserving, and I think it just shows a strong desire. I think every year for Moses Howe, we have between 4 and 10 individuals or groups that are nominated, so. Is there,
Again, not having personal connections with any of them, I just reading through these and just seeing the number of nominations that came in for Ruth Lowe. There's obviously a good amount of support for.
is
I
that a motion?
I was gonna say, I'll make a motion to motion down here, nominate.
Choose to name Ruth Lowe as the, or whomever as the recipient of the I think it's the 2024 Moses Howe Award.
Is it 2024 or 2025?
It's the 2025 award, but for service in 2024, if you track how we
How you do it,
named
okay.
it in other years.
Alright, so then I move to choose Ruth Lowe as the recipient of the 2025 Moses Howe Award.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any other conversation? Roll call, Harry.
Second, I.
Matt's and I.
Ledger,
Whitman, aye. Congratulations, Ruth, and thank you to everyone who nominated her. I'm just going through to make sure I cover the names of the next ones, sorry guys. For the town report, we have two. Every year the town report is dedicated and there is an in memoriam. And this year, I think for, and this is for the 2024
FY 2024.
FY 2024, thank you, Tamika, annual report, which is from June, July,
July
20.
1, 23.
23 to June
23.
30th, 2024.
yeah, sorry. So, so we have some, I think we have two options for in memoriam, but I'm not 100% sure based on the timing that the one is actually a fiscal year 2024. Is that correct? Because I think,
One of them is not in FY 2024.
correct.
For in memoriam.
Right. So I think the one, we have two for in memoriam, or two submitted that were for in memoriam, William Bailey, who fits within the fiscal year 24, and Kira Sullivan, who is outside of the fiscal year 24 and would be a fiscal year 25.
Okay.
So historically, in the past, when we've had this, we have not considered the out of fiscal year individual or individuals. We've just went with the kind of appropriate fiscal year one and then held the potential.
Can I have a it says dedication and in memoriam, that's one award, it's not like we're doing a dedication and memoriam?
There's two separate ones and it gives them an option in a drop-down menu if they're picking in memoriam or dedication.
Okay,
So there's one page for that can be dedicated to an individual who's either living or has passed away. It can be a Rutland resident or a town employee. The in memoriam page is specifically for somebody who passed away during that fiscal year
okay.
because technically it's a historical document.
So given that, then our option for the in memoriam would be Mr. William Bailey.
love
Because that was the during the fiscal, the one applicant or nominee that we got, that was fiscal year 20.
Yeah, so I personally knew Bill, I will say that. Great guy, did a lot in town, so I guess if you don't mind, I'd like to make the motion, since he's the only one, to have, to offer in memoriam the 2024 annual town report for William Bailey.
A motion, is there a second?
Second motion.
Any other conversation? Roll call, Harry.
Second, I.
Matt's and I.
Ledger,
Whitman, aye.
can we
Thank you.
hold curious until next year?
I was gonna say, we can just put a note back out to the nominee that it would be a fiscal year 25 in memoriam.
Historically, we haven't held nominees, we've just encouraged folks to re-nominate that person next year.
Because it's a lot to track and everything. So for the in dedication, I believe we have 3 individuals for the dedication. Mr. Dick Williams, Ms. Lynn Turcott, and Ms. Ruth Lowe. Am I missing any? And I think, historically, I think there's been times that we have, that the town has done dedication of added multiples for dedication. Am I wrong, Tamika, or has it?
In recent history, it's been like an organization, like a couple years ago, it was the 300th anniversary committee.
Yep.
I don't know in recent years that I've seen multiple individuals recognized, more so organizations.
Okay.
But that's not to say that the board couldn't do that.
No, I just wasn't sure. I couldn't remember off the top of my head, so thank you. So, each nominee, I think, has 1 applicant. I think, all 3 have been longstanding and very involved in the community Rutland residents, with a lot of deep history and knowledge, and of the town, as well as a true love of the history of the town. So I think any of the 3 would be, similar to the Moses Howe, any of them would be phenomenal, dedicatees. It's late.
Has Lynn ever been nominated for anything before? Do you remember, or do we know?
Not that I can specifically recall.
I mean, some people lead quiet lives in the background and do a lot of things for the town and they just get never noticed, so that's why I asked.
I think Lynn is probably one of those.
Huh?
I think Lynn is probably one of those.
Right.
So, we did, offer Ruth the Moses Howe this year, so I don't know, and I don't wanna direct anything any which way, but is there a motion from anyone for the, dedication?
I'll make a motion, that we nominate Lynn Morrell Turcott, for the dedication in the 2024 annual town report.
Is there a second?
Second motion.
The motion and second, roll call, Harry,
Second, aye?
Matt's and I.
Ledger I.
Whitman, aye. Thank you. Thank you to everyone for the nominees and to all the nominees for all of their work, because this is one of those that it never feels right to have to pick just one, because everybody is so deserving. And I appreciate that. Moving on, we have the 2025 annual town meeting. We would like to open the warrant. I think we have a draft of the calendar in our, sorry, I'm all over the place. In our packets. And this would, I think by opening the warrant today, then we would have ample time to allow for a 2+ week opening. And sorry, I'm just looking at the calendar, almost a month-long opening to provide for boards, commissions, and citizens or anyone to submit warrant articles, and then provide time for legal review and everything. For our May 10th town meeting. I'm comfortable with the calendar that's proposed. We met last week jointly with FinCom and Select Board. If we open the meeting tonight, if we open the warrant tonight, then we are proposing to close the warrant on Thursday, April 10th at 5 p.m.
Okay.
I would like to strongly urge no free cash spending articles, just given not knowing how much we're going to have to put in for potential override failure or any other unforeseen expenses. So I would just like to put that request out as well. But does anyone have any comments on the calendar? Austin, Tamika, do you have any comments or anything to add?
On the schedule, no, just there's a couple of draft articles that the planning board's been working on that are included in the draft warrant. 2 zoning articles, one for accessory dwelling units and the other for battery and energy storage system facilities. The planning board intends on holding their public hearing on that on April 8th. There was a request from the planner if the board felt comfortable referring that back to kind of start the process tonight after receiving the draft warrant, if you wanted to refer that back. It's just one of the many steps that we have to do to follow that process. Do you have something to make? No? Obviously, it's not required to do that, but we have the draft copy of the warrant here. Right now, just based off of what we've received from some town departments and what we're expecting to receive from town departments, there's 21 articles slated, with exception to a couple of things that aren't included, obviously, not knowing what the board's decision was tonight on the recall, that's not included yet, so once that's finalized, we can throw that in here. And also, you have not yet received the information from the consultant that will help us with our municipal aggregation, so there's language that we have to accept here. That will be included. This is just the initial, very, very first draft warrant.
Another thing, I think, and I may have missed it, is I think Concom's and the bylaw
The
committee are
wetlands.
working on the wetlands bylaw
Yep.
as well, that they're hoping to have on this
Yep.
article as well.
Yep. So, and you know, obviously this doesn't include any petitions that have been received, right? So, you know, after you have a meeting scheduled on April 14th, your regular select board meeting, there's your, you know, second draft review of the warrant with everything I just mentioned and whatever comes in from
Right.
petitions.
And if I
Yep.
may, I was on I watched most of the planning board meeting the other night, and I understand that the accessory dwelling units needs to move forward per MGL. We need to have something, or we're open to everything essentially. And I think they are still planning to move forward the battery energy storage facility bylaw. Tamika, is that, they're still, okay. So I think that having those kind of necessitate, that I know the ADUs needs to happen, a lot of communities dealt with it in the fall. There's a statute of limitations timeline, I'm comfortable referring that back to them. And I think the energy storage facilities they've been working on as well, and so to be able to provide with a consultant as well. And so I'm comfortable kind of referring that back also so that they can continue their public hearing process.
I have no concerns, I just would ask that they make sure they hold their public hearings before we
And they
place warrant articles.
and they ideally have their recommendations by the time we are able to, because that was some of the conversation that we had, right, was providing them adequate time and now doing that. So I guess we can maybe do it as 2 motions to move to call the do we need to sorry Austin, do we need to move to call the annual town meeting? Because we have here 6 p.m. I think usually we start earlier. But I also know we need to work with the moderator to figure out the time of that. So can we open the warrant without actually setting the actual time, or is the board comfortable keeping it at a 6 o'clock time?
The town meeting,
Sorry.
is it at 6 or 7?
6.
6? Okay,
Personally, I'd prefer even earlier, but.
yeah. Which, I mean, the book, you could do that.
Well, I guess my concern is we need to coordinate with the moderator also. And so I don't remember, I think the past few years, has it been 6 o'clock, Tamika? I don't remember, it's,
You go 10 a.m. like West Boylston. So yeah, so call it for the 10th at 6 p.m. at Glenwood.
Okay.
And that covers you.
alright, so then I would entertain a motion to call the annual town meeting for Saturday, May 10th, 2025 at 6 p.m. at Glenwood Elementary School and to open the warrant with a closing date, open the warrant now with a closing date of April 10th at 5 p.m. with the consideration of no free cash spending article requests. No free cash spending article requests.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any other conversation? Roll call, Harry.
Second, aye.
Matt's and I.
Ledger I.
Whitman, aye. And then I think making a motion to refer back to planning board the 2 zoning bylaw considerations is appropriate for the ADU as well as the energy battery storage facilities. So is there a motion for the board to refer back to planning board the 2 zoning bylaw amendments or zoning bylaws for the accessory dwelling units and the battery energy storage facilities?
Again, could you explain to me why those are going back again, Austin?
So this
Why are
is-
we sending these back to zoning bylaws?
No, so this is a procedural thing that happens for zoning bylaw amendments, so the planning board worked on it, wanted to submit it to select board, procedurally it has to be referred back to the planning board for them to hold their public hearing.
Okay, alright.
So they've basically communicated to us that, hey, we're working on these, we want to have them on the warrant. We say we received that communication, we are on the surface at least, amenable to placing them, go ahead and have your public hearings and continue working on your process.
Okay.
So moved on the
Yeah.
motion.
Is there a second?
Second,
Roll call, Harry.
segment aye.
Matt's and I.
Ledger I.
Whitman, aye.
Just one more thing, just overall, I know we had discussed previously, what potentially it looks like to have an override article, so this is kind of the standard article that, here's one option, that's included in the draft warrant. What would be included here is a motion that just says tying it directly for the town budget, tying it directly to the Proposition 2.5 override. Very similar to previous years where we've shown kind of what it looks like with it, what it looks like without it. This is kind of just a standard, probably what people are used to. You would do the same thing, you'd have separate articles for Wachusett and for Bay Path. So there's one, pretty standard what we're familiar with. The second is what we talked about, the contingent budget, which takes into account the budget overview page, so the headers that you see on our budget overview page of general government, public safety, public works, human services, and then it breaks out the 2 regional school assessments. So this was language that's recommended by DOR if you're going to do a contingent upon Prop 2.5 override, and you wanna make it clear. So what this does is it shows, and I just updated it as we were talking. This is the V2 budget figure, right? So if you look at the V2 budget, all of these headers add up to 29.389, with exception to Wachusett. So what I did after talking with the Paxton Town Administrator, they are reducing the assessment by a certain percentage. So on the discretionary assessment, they're only funding the discretionary assessment 2.5%. Anything above that, they are overriding, or proposing
Okay.
to be an override. So our assessment this year proposed is 11%, so 2.5 and 11%, that's a big chunk.
Right.
So it's about a $600,000 increase for Wachusett on the discretionary assessment. So what I did is I I just said we'll only fund 400 with our general fund budget, right? The rest will have to come from an override. So these are the figures that make the override budget. So general government gets $395,000 of the override to get to the recommended budget that you guys heard from departments last week. So, you know, going down here, public safety gets about 600,000, public works 550, human services 120, and then trying to tie in the schools, the need is about 1.8 million. So that totals, as was requested by you guys, to see what that looks like, so what the total overall budget would look like with all those. So if the override doesn't pass, this is our budget. The only thing that we'll have to do, as I mentioned in my note, is we're gonna have to find a way to make Wachusett whole. The good thing is you've basically funded most of your fiscal year assessment. So what we can do is we can go back in the fall to town meeting and appropriate $216,000. If it's not changed, the school district may come back and lower the assessment a little bit.
Or increase it.
Or hopefully not. We would use $216,000 in free cash. We have funds for the full year. You know, I didn't tie in Bay Path to this because candidly, it didn't feel like Bay Path has been the challenge here for us. It's the significant increases for Wachusett. So this is the option that is recommended by DOR and meeting with the finance team today. This is also what they're recommending to the board as well for a budget article. So one article tying in all of our costs for the fiscal year into the override question, and also we don't have to have like 3 different articles.
Or 3 different town meetings or something.
Or 3
if
different town meetings, yep.
the override fails, this is what, and I think we just need to be mindful for us, but more so the public, that
Why aren't you asking for 2.1 million?
no,
You're-
not
oh,
yet.
okay, alright.
That's gonna be next, sorry. For the WRSD assessment, we're saying the non-contingent amount, so if the override were to fail, that would fail, Rutland would fail the WRSD budget. But if the other 4 communities pass the WRSD budget, we still are on the hook to pay the full 17.6
Yep.
million, which is why we would have that 216,277 in free
Yes.
cash in the following fall. It's not a number so high that we wouldn't be able to bridge the gap from July 1st to November without it, and also it's a number that hopefully we would have in free cash in the fall. It's not a $600,000 number that we may not have in free cash.
Yeah, the idea is you find a number that you're comfortable with spending from free cash to, and you know,
And
go
it,
ahead,
sorry, and it ties the override to the schools also to so that the schools, and I think we would have a hard time touching Bay Path because Bay Path doesn't ask for any, unfortunately, the way the funding formula works, Bay Path isn't asking for anything above the minimum. And we all know that that's a funding formula issue and not but I think that that's how we can do it on the WRSD and not on the Bay Path.
I'm sorry, maybe it's just me, but I'm trying to understand how a non-contingent appropriation, we require $1.6 million additional for the school budget, which needs to come from the override. So I'm having a hard time, my brain is not translating how only 216,000 is contingent on the override for the school budget.
Yeah, so remember, you know, we have one pot of money for everything, right?
Right.
So taking into account all of our assessments, Bay Path, Wachusett, and then the cost of the FY '26 budget request, that's where we had the, you know, approximately $2 million deficit, right? So, you know, if you really think about it, of our pot of money, of new available revenue, you know, Wachusett, well, let's say our educational expenses took all of that, which requires an additional sum of money. So, you know, we can play with whatever figure we want for Wachusett. Like if you wanna tie more into it, it's just again, what do we feel comfortable with on the free cash side if the school budget passes and our override fails?
So if I'm trying to work this out.
Yep.
We are bound to the school budget, what our assessment is. So does the non-contingent appropriations reflect as much of that as we can, and then all the general government, public safety, those are our cut budget values?
So the 5.180, for example, for general government, those are the figures that you guys just endorsed tonight for V2.
For V2,
Yep.
okay.
To get to our regular budget that everyone just requested, general government needs an additional $395,000 to total 5.575.
Okay,
Right, so this is, let me just get back
Got
to
that.
this. This is this plus this.
Yep. So then
Right.
if the override fails, essentially we would come back and appropriate just the WRSD assessment and nothing else.
You would just
We don't-
appropriate
right.
additional money to WRSD, yes, the
But that only
260.
because we don't have anything
Yep.
unless, for whatever reason we.
Yep. You've basically told the town, this is our cut budget. So you're whole, like, we don't have to go back to town meeting.
Okay,
To modify a new budget. We've got a town budget with this. And then if the school budget passes and this will ultimately be our assessment, we'll just have to come back and appropriate an additional $216,000.
And I think Jen, to your point there is, if the WRSD assessment passes in the other 4 towns, we have to pay our full assessment no
Right.
matter what, and we
Right.
need to make sure that we're in some financial capacity able to pay that, whether it's from free cash or stabilization or whatever. So to reduce it by $1.5 million or whatever is very risky if it were to pass in the other communities, because we're still on the hook for that, and that would completely take out.
okay, I get it now.
Yep.
This is not gonna make sense to your average person that's trying to understand why we're asking for $2.1 million and
Yeah, so we'll have to
and why-
explain it. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, we'll just have to explain it.
I think it's genius.
I think it's different than what we're used to, but it's once and I think we can utilize this during our information sessions to say, this is like, if you're only gonna give us $29,389,949, then this is what you're getting. And knowing that there might be that asterisk where in the fall, we're gonna come back and need $216,277 in free cash because we're not sure.
Can we put an asterisk on that then, to say this is a value that we have to pay no matter what, whether the override passes or fails?
Yeah, and so, I think what we're gonna have to do this year, especially for an override, we'll have to ask the moderator if we can, do a presentation, explain this, so.
Okay.
I imagine maybe one of the board members we can work with to present that on behalf of the board. We could do that. Obviously, there's more language here about what that means. We'll modify this summary to be a little bit more, I just copied and pasted from the previous one, to be a little bit more explicit about what this means. So, the asterisks can probably be covered here in the summary, Jen.
I just wanna make sure it's clear that even if the override fails, we still have to come up with that remaining 216,000.
Yep.
From some
We may,
place.
I mean, that's the.
Right.
Again, if the
Like-
assessment,
Right, if they don't reduce it, yeah.
It might be easier for people if you put the budget you want first. With the override, it's the last column. If you put it first, and then you say if the override doesn't pass, the middle column is what we're taking away from everyone,
Gotcha, yeah.
and then the last column is what you're left with.
Yeah.
Just
I think
Yeah, so
DOR
it's
recommends.
Yeah, I was trying to follow the format that DOR wanted us to follow.
Yeah.
And it's all obviously in the motion, so contingent on, and that's why, the motion has to be explicit about what exactly are people voting for with the override on the ballot, so, this will try to tell them, that it dividing the share of what will be appropriated, right? So out of the 2.1 million, we're only gonna appropriate 1.8 of it, so that'll leave us a little bit of excess levy capacity too, guys.
1.9 really.
1.9. So this is gonna be the share, so, we'll make sure the public safety's whole, all the stuff that we've been talking about, right? This by no means can be just, someone stands up, makes the motion, and then we vote on it, like, we're gonna definitely have to ask for some time from the moderator to explain this as well, for sure.
And I think the hope is doing it this way is to prevent having to go back, if the override were to fail at the ballot, to prevent having to go back to a subsequent town meeting before June 30th for a redo of the budget. And so
Which I would be in favor of, for sure.
so I think that that's why it is this way, and it's trying to have buy-in from on the school side for the override, and if the override doesn't pass, then
I think, I agree with Jess, you look at that and you're gonna get questions, I would assume. You're asking for 2.1 million, how much of that goes to the town? And how much of it goes to the school? Cause that's not very evident up there, that 2 million, so.
But I think-
Where does that 1.6 million to the school show up?
Well, again, we can't treat it like that because it's one pie, so,
Right.
you know, sure, I could reduce the Wachusett assessment by 1.6 million here, and then put it here, like, we could do that, but do you feel comfortable if the override fails, going somewhere else to find that money, right? So
I'm
that,
just looking at it from transparency.
I
They
think,
understand. That's my,
yeah,
you know, that the town is gonna vote on this, whether they up or down isn't, that's not my issue. I hope they vote for it, but if they don't, that's okay. But it needs to be transparent, cause they don't know. You got a Wachusett assessment of 17 million, that's great. But how much of that is in the money we're asking for? And I guess I don't see that.
yeah, and I agree, Harry, but I see where they're going with this, and I agree with what's up here now that I understand it. I think where we need to make sure we explain that is in the info sessions and during the explanation
Yeah.
at town meeting, that this is the amount of the override, and we're asking for that because this is how much our school assessment increased, and this is how much the town operating expenses increased. That's where we're getting the total override number from, but I think that's part of the info session explanation versus.
And I know Wachusett is there, but in the minds to me
Yeah.
of the average resident of Rutland.
Yeah.
We're talking 25 million and the town is overspending.
Yep.
By almost 1.6. Why are you guys overspending so much?
well, and if you look at it a little bit differently, right, like,
Yeah.
you know, think about this, right, so, if the override fails, so the override, we're asking to appropriate 1.8 million of the 2.1 million. The schools are still gonna get their 216, but we're gonna have to cut 1.6, and that's what you're seeing in this column here, right?
Exactly.
1.6 is cut to all town departments that you see listed in those categories there. And especially when we put the caveat, like, you know, the schools aren't even gonna be made whole, they're still gonna take more. $216,000 of free cash, there's kind of how you can also try to frame it a little bit differently, right?
And I really hope that there's advocacy from our school partners, our school elected officials as well, to speak to this as well, because to both of your points, a lot of it is whether or not it's state funding issues, but it's education driven. Right.
Yep.
And I will argue that we're not overspending, that Prop 2.5 has done us a huge disservice. And if the state wants to hold us to Prop 2.5, then hold our expenses to 2.5. Or give us more state aid, which neither is happening, right? And so I think I don't think we've all gone through the budget. I don't think that there's fluff in.
Well, I don't think the town budget's the problem. It's not, it's the education that's the problem.
Yeah, but.
We could easily absorb 500,000, but like Dr. Reed said, he said, if we were funded properly, we would have an additional $17 million this year. And there'd be no need for overrides or anything. So it's not the town that has the problem, it's the education system because of the state.
Right.
Right,
And
but I think that's an important thing to distinguish, and I think that Dr. Riley and is it Michelle?
Yeah.
Did a really good job of, to your point, Leah, saying they're not top heavy on, there's not too many teachers. They don't have the resources that they need. It's strictly because of the state funding formula. It's not that the school is over budgeting or not allocating correctly. I think they've done, as we've seen, a good job of the last couple of years trying to right the ship, if you will. And now we're getting more transparent numbers, and it's not, yes, it's the education budget, that's the big expense, but it's not because the school is incorrectly or improperly budgeting for it, it's the state formula that's the issue.
And we hear from Daypath that they have a hard time, they don't spend all of their mandated net school spending, so they have to return it because they're not meeting their state minimums. And so again, that points to a state issue, right?
Yes.
And so I think that I wanna give Wachusett the credit, but I also think that we do need to tie in the education piece.
And if I can, I'm gonna give a shout out, that's why it's so important to get out to Amherst before the Ways and Means Committee and voice your opposition to the way Wachusett is getting its money on the 24th of this month, next Monday.
So Austin, I personally like this format. It's going to take some, it's a change, but I think it's we're trying to do things more
More descriptive.
right. And this is a DOR recommendation. It's not just pulled out of wherever, so.
Can you explain the headers in other words
Yeah.
without contingent?
Yeah, we'll just have to make sure the motion is, with
Has
that
that
too,
one.
yeah. Cause this is how DOR has recommended is, they use the word contingent in, what they want us to do. Just to make it clear for, voters, but also to DOR when we're presenting this to them. Like I.
What does it mean, not contingent?
Non-override budget,
Right,
the cut budget, if you will.
because everything else is contingent on an override.
You could change, hypothetically, you could
But
say,
that's the cut budget,
you could
Right.
say
Right.
non-override, like Jen just said,
yeah.
override.
Budget.
That's more clear.
But also maybe I would, in parentheses, put contingent versus, or non-contingent versus contingent, because in the motion, I think we need to
Yeah.
have the
Yeah.
We'll have to
contingent
change
versus.
the motion here too, yeah.
No, but I think I think we can play around with the wording,
Yep.
essentially, but I like this
But that's-
idea,
That's more clear.
I like this idea and.
And then we'll also show, just to make it clear, so that budget summary page that we
Yep.
use, we'll also include that, so, folks can see of the, of the 5.75 or of the 5.18 for general government, for example, they'll see the explicit departments too, but just for the warrant article's sake, this is the presentation that's
And
recommended.
just to address, cause I know you had mentioned the 1.9 versus the 2.1. If we're asking for 2.1, why are we showing a 1.887397 number here? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, some of the assessments had come in after we had determined some of the final assessments on health insurance and schools and everything. State aid had come in after we had the 2.1 million. And I think it's always in best practice to have not down to the exact dollar for an overage, just because there is some fluidity there also.
Yeah, like you guys did a couple years ago, right? It was,
I think it was 2
You asked for
million and we
2,
needed
you
like
asked- 7, 8,
1.8
whatever.
or, yeah, something like that, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I like this, I think, thank you for the work on it, Austin.
Absolutely.
Moving on, you don't need a motion or anything for this, this was.
No, I just wanted to see
kinda
what the consensus was.
Moving on, I had asked to put on that we have as a cohesive 5-member board or 4-member board, signed letter for state aid advocacy to take to UMass Amherst on Monday next week, to our state legislatures, basically advocating for an increase in local aid and chapter 70 funding for the schools and talking about kind of the cuts that it means to town. I would also encourage each of us and anyone in the public to individually write letters. MARS, the Massachusetts Association of Regional Schools, has a draft letter as well. I'm not sure if it's online yet or not. If you want to advocate for the school funding side, you don't have to go in person. If anyone wants to create a letter, sign it, advocating for more state aid, drop it off. I will be going out on Monday to UMass Amherst. I'm not sure if anyone else is, but really having piles of written, signed letters from as many individuals, groups, whatever as possible is impactful. And so I think there's a good group from Wachusett that's going out. I'm not sure from the rest of our board who's going, but I'm taking a vacation day to go
I'm
out.
planning on going.
Okay. Thank you, Harry. So
Is there a model for this letter somewhere?
I will look and see if the Mass Association of Regional Schools has one posted. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not sure Austin if MMA has one. Tamika has drafted one that we can share as well. But it's thank you, Tamika, for drafting this. And it would just like to have, like I said, like a cohesive letter from the entire board, and then hopefully individual members can write an impactful letter as well. So I would, if the board's okay with the advocacy piece, I would entertain a motion to send a letter to the state legislature advocating for an increase in state aid.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second,
Any other conversation? Roll call, Harry.
Second, aye.
Mattson, aye.
Ledger I.
Whitman, aye. It is almost 9:30. I don't wanna keep us here for the Wachusett Leadership Group. Policy, I think that it's really important and timely though. Having made some of the big decisions on the budget, I'm hoping that at our next meeting, we can focus a little bit on this. I know we had talked, or I think we had introduced it at a previous meeting as well. I wanna thank Austin for kind of putting this together, and I think there's interest definitely from the school side, at least the school administration, to have something of this nature formed. Austin, I'm not sure if I think you've talked to some of the other member town administrators as well, and managers, and I think that there's comprehensively, on the surface, strong support for something of this nature as well. So is the board comfortable holding this until next meeting, given that it's almost 9:30?
Through the chair. Austin, this was your kind of baby. Are you okay with us holding it? Okay.
Are there any other future agenda request items?
I don't know where, I can't remember if you had said you were doing anything, Austin, but I still would like at some point to take an opportunity to review outstanding warrant articles.
Yeah.
Either close them out and put them back to free cash or whatever we need to do.
Yeah, so it's something that the accountant actually has the authority to do. Usually that happens at the end of a fiscal year when they're kind of cleaning things up, so yeah, I don't know if this is a last ditch effort for departments who have an article to spend their money, but that's something that will occur over the next few months.
I guess if it's not too much, and I realize there's a whole lot going on with the budget and everything, but to pull for us just to see again what the outstanding warrant articles are, and the dollar amounts, because I think that there are some that may still have an interest in and just nobody was told to act on it versus.
Yeah, which is part of my second question, which is if we have articles that appropriate money for things like this, is there a way that we can put policy in place to say you need to act on it within X amount of time?
It's in our financial policies now.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
how do
and
we
usually the
enforce
best
that?
practice is like 3 years. If you don't do anything within 3 years, the accountant's gonna close it out.
Okay. So can we make, like, do we need to do something like what we did last to say, Donna, it's in our policies, make sure you're
No.
enforcing this?
No, I mean, so it exists now and
Okay,
And I think it's a recent policy, it was in the
Yeah.
financial policies that we
Okay.
just did last year,
Okay.
where I think the policy, last meeting about the PO and everything,
Yep.
was a policy from 2017 or something, so just kind of
Okay.
reauthorizing that because it wasn't something that had been followed, but the newer like the HR and personnel policies and financial policies, I feel like we have staff that are
okay,
doing
no,
that,
that's,
but-
and that's fine, I just wanted to make sure it was,
yeah, cause well, and you'll see tomorrow on the report that comes from Donna, on that report does show the articles. You know, so both general fund and some of our enterprise funds have, especially on the water side, there's still some outstanding articles from a while ago that,
yeah, those are the big ones, are like, these are, you know,
yeah,
5+ years and they're still sitting out there with no change, there's no reason why we should
Yep.
keep them around.
yeah, or we repurpose them for something else, right? Like, one, just, you know, and not asking for a comprehensive discussion here, but like I know one of the big things that Paul is working on and is passionate about is the secondary water source, right? So can we repurpose some of that maybe to front the initial work for the secondary water source project? While we wait on some of the money to come from the state there, so things like that talks about.
Thank you.
Any other future agenda request items? Otherwise, our currently scheduled upcoming meetings are March 31st and April 14th and 28th. Is there any other, and keep an eye because FinCom I think will be scheduling meetings as well. And I'm not sure if we'll have any other requests for joint meetings or anything.
I was gonna ask, are we gonna expect an additional one maybe
I think we
for
should.
with FinCom to talk about the cut budget?
I think that
We
they
should
wanted,
expect an additional one, yeah.
and my guess is,
Scheduled for Thursday.
So maybe after Thursday we'll hear.
I was gonna say, my guess is it would probably be a request for Thursday night, but I don't know for sure,
This
so-
Thursday?
No, I think they are hoping to meet this Thursday.
Yes. It's already posted.
Okay, but I think we aren't posted and I think that they should have, if we wanna attend, we can, but I think it should be their conversation.
Yes.
And then if we wanna have a joint meeting, I would think
After that.
it would probably be, they prefer Thursday nights,
Okay.
I think on their end, I'm not sure. Any other business to come before the board? Hearing none, I would like to thank everyone for their work tonight and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second motion.
Roll call, Harry,
Second, aye.
Matt's and I.
Dry.
Whitman, aye. Thank you all. Thank you for the